Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
I'm a fan of classic movies.
Hello and welcome to Overlapping Dialogue, a podcast of double features dedicated to programming the finest, most eclectic, and downright bizarre film pairings, and cataloging the discussions that ensue. We're gruesome twosome, Kyle and Levi Huffman. I'm Kyle.
I'm Levi.
And here we are, here for episode 98. Sort of a golden episode, because Levi was born in 1998, and we're recording this on the day prior to Levi's 26th birthday. Happy birthday, Levi.
Thank you.
You'll already have been 26 for a few days by the time this episode drops on Friday. Mm-hmm. What's your birthday vibe check this year?
It'll be an interesting one. And I mean, I already got a big birthday present today. After, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But sports related. But it's gonna be weird because it's like the first day of school and the first day of soccer tryouts for my school team, and then also going out to eat after that for my birthday. So it's just like a lot of different.
And then also, literally, always your birthday is literally sometimes the very first day of school, or always right around the very beginning.
So
of the
I'm
new
used
school
to that,
year.
but it's just going to be kind of a hectic day, which I don't care. I mean, because a lot of people are like, oh, you know, like, oh, I need to take off on my birthday. Like, screw you, get a life. Like, sorry, I know a lot of people do that, so sorry.
But anyways,
and a lot of people I really love and care about too.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah, no, you need.
Well,
to,
with teaching, you can't just do stuff like that. Anyways.
Well, some people would, but
yeah, suspect.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of kids do that. Where they're just like, oh, I'm just gonna like lay out, and it's like, yeah, well, that's just like dumb. So,
obviously, a student can get away with it more because they're just one student. But yeah, anyways,
one teacher, but
true.
You know,
this birthday treat for Levi. No, not Blue Plate Special just yet. But
should we introduce what we're doing for the podcast yet?
That's what I'm getting ready to do.
Oh, right.
Yes. That's literally what I'm about to do.
Excuse him, what?
Tampopo from.
I thought you were going to start talking about the next.
What year was it? 1985. Usually have it written down. 1985, and The Trip from 2010. As we talked about last time when we were previewing these, both food movies. One, of course,
Sausage Party or
did you
Cloudy
see
with
that?
a Chance of Meatballs. No,
I
did see Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
That's fine. Even though it did create the whole Lord and Miller hegemony that
that's
is still
right.
going on.
I kind of always forget that was like their first thing because it's very easy to forget. I mean, because I love that book, the storybook.
Yeah,
there's so many great storybooks.
Well, the movie's fine. The movie's good.
Yeah,
but
there's so many storybooks though that have been made into movies that are like like Jumanji is like.
Well, the Rob Williams one was fine.
Yeah, but come on. Like,
yeah, but let's get real. So let's get the vibe.
I mean, I did see Zathura with Sam Rockwell many years ago, and that was kind of. But that's what I always thought was so interesting about Jumanji is I thought, oh, it's the game. No, it's the movie. No, actually, it's the book.
Yeah.
The game kind of came out of it. And the movie. So.
And then there's all those Seuss stuff, like Dr. Seuss, like A Cat in a Hat.
Yeah, and that's its own industry, But specifically, like Jumanji, if you just go look at the art of that, it just looks so good and so original for the time. Polar Express is another one. We go on and on.
Chris Van Allsburg specifically was the guy behind all the books.
Yes. You talking about Jumanji or?
Well, I think he did Jumanji and Zathura and Polar Express.
Oh, did he do Polar Express too? I didn't know.
I think so.
Huh,
yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, I always say this like. The Liam Neeson narration of that book.
Yeah.
I had a book on tape as a kid, and that, like, I almost want to cry thinking about the very end of it, about the silver bells and all that. Amazing. Liam Neeson's got a great voice, but anyways. But
I love the imagery of that book, too. It's very alien in a way. It's like of that time period of book is very specific. And I mean, it kind of reminds me of that book, the Arrival that I just read that your fiance Lainey let me read. It's that whole era of children's book is really great. I think of the '90s is just like we kind of peaked there.
I think the thing too about Chris Van Allsburg that was really special, and this probably goes to that, is a lot of the illustrations in that book feel like still photographs of like particular moments. Like, because a lot of kids' books, when you read them, they feel like they're trying to be as like big picture as possible so they can fit as much stuff on the page. But those books feel like you're capturing a moment of the story as opposed to
that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
just trying to be as widescreen as possible to depict it. It's actually more specific.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, there's images from that I remember that are very particular. I'm looking here at some of the other books he did. Cause I kind of feel dumb. I never realized that was the same person who did Polar Express and Jumanji. And Jumanji's actually randomly older than you think. It's from like 1981.
Sorry about that, by the way. I'll try to pull the audio up, but I'm realizing that it wasn't recording on our regular mic. Anyways, continue.
Anyway, but yeah, I always forget that Jumanji. What's funny is we could talk about the movies, not this. But the Jumanji is actually older than I had remembered.
From the 80s,
from 81. Yeah. And then Zathura wasn't written until 2002, so it's 20 years later. That's funny.
Now again, I'm not going to defend the Jumanji movie as some great, amazing thing. But I remember as a I never did like it quite as much as some other people as a kid.
Yeah, I don't get it. But anyway,
we already had a Robin Williams discussion.
There's that whole thing where what year is this? And everybody's like, "Oh, this is so funny," and I'm like, "It's so not."
Yeah.
Some other books that he wrote. The Z Was Zapped. Looks dumb as hell, but anyway, The Stranger. Look at that. It's like a kid's book.
I mean, I'm not trying to lay this on thick. You look at the images in those books; they're very like auteurist images for a kid's book. I feel like
Wretched Stone.
They're
the
very
Widow's Broom,
pronounced.
The Sweetest Fig.
Is he still alive, or did he pass away?
I think so. Yeah, he's 75.
Oh, okay.
But anyway. So food movies is what we were kind of talking about here, but it's not. Yeah, it's not like Sausage Party or Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs.
Oh, I was literally trying to think, how do we get over here again?
Let me even just look up and see what pops up on Google if we type in food movies. Okay, the first two movies are The Taste of Things, which just came out pretty recently, and Pig, with the Nick Cage movie. Phantom Thread, yeah, okay, I guess. The Menu. It's all part of the menu.
That might come up here in a little bit.
The Founder.
Something else.
The Founder.
Yeah.
City of Gold. Okay, I don't know what that is. Burnt.
Now, there's a whole subgenre of movies about chefs in general. So
Super Size Me, Sideways, Unfrosted. We were talking about Unfrosted. Hero Dreams of Sushi. Now, a lot of these are documentaries.
Chocolat was another one I was kind of thinking about. On
here. Like Water for Chocolate. That's always been the dumbest name ever. By the way. Big Night. That's always a movie I've heard about. Ratatouille.
You said it earlier. Ratatouille is one
Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So that's its own whole waiting. Remember that movie?
Yeah.
Sausage Party is one of these. But I mean, obviously, there's that whole idea of like, and then there's movies that you really remember for their food. Like, I think a lot of the first Harry Potter movie is like food. But also part of that, and not that there's a problem with that anyway, that's partly tied to the character. Not like starving, literally,
but he's suddenly in a world of abundance,
right? That's what I'm saying.
Not just with food, but everything.
So I think that really
that's literally magic.
Is a random aspect of that movie that the book can't even really visually imply, just by nature of the medium.
Yeah.
But something I never thought about until now is that literally that's its own wish fulfillment for him is to actually be able to eat food.
Because you think about in a Golden Corral,
right? Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, yeah, it's literally the part where it's the banquet at the beginning.
Yeah.
But yeah, so
the Great Hall,
right? And I mean, because there's that scene. Earlier, you had the cake, "Happy Birthday, Harry," like, them on the train. Later on, breakfast stuff with the howler thing, or no, that's in the second one. Never mind. the orb. I didn't know what I've forgotten. And then Christmas stuff. So there's like a bunch of parts where it's
That
like
Lee
food,
Jordan
food,
stink
food,
face.
food. Yeah. I don't know what I've forgotten. Like Scottish, I don't know. But anyway, the
Those daggum Scottish people.
I actually don't mind them that bad, but
Drew McIntyre, Scottish Warrior.
I thought you were talking about Drew McWeeny for a second. I was like, yeah, more like guy who can't finish a podcast. But anyway,
Yeah.
we'll never have that problem until we do. What are we talking about? Food movies? Okay. So there's a lot of food, and obviously there's movies you think, a lot about food in a movie.
Well, you know, one I just thought of that you mentioned is the wait for the cream scene in Inglourious Bastards, how like those insert shots are so lush, and it's like a lot of things going on there. For one, that character like thinking about milk and dairy and how that relates to like the beginning of the movie, and you know, her character being someone who's had to crawl their way to barely get by and survive, and then here's this Nazi who's like openly eating this food, and it looks so lush and pleasant and, you know, good. But then also the like random insert shots, and Tarantino does this in other movies too, of in that scene in particular, adding to the tension of the scene. And anyways, I know that's not a food movie, but that's something I've
when we were rewatching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there's a lot of shots in that movie that really emphasize alcohol or
pouring the glasses and
so,
having that ice in
them. And so that's not as much
the mac
and
cheese too.
Yeah, but there's and dog food.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's just to say that I think there's a link between movies and food in a certain way. We can talk about this when we talk about Tampopo first here in a little bit, about kind of that as like a sensual experience.
Well, also too that like movies and food are tied together so inextricably in terms of in the movie theaters eating snacks or things, or from your own home. I mean, movies and food are inevitably tied together in a fundamental way. So
anyway, got a lot to get there.
Yeah, we're gonna get into all that. But first, Levi, his birthday present was his Chelsea FC just won a big game against
Wolverhampton Wanderers.
Yeah. How did that go? 6-2.
6-2. They were already saying as we were watching it, as I was watching, I actually stayed home from church, which is not something I normally do. I don't normally out of church, but I will kind of wanted a break, and I was like, okay, I'll stay home because this game was at 9 o'clock, and I was going to be at church. And I was like, okay, I'll watch this. And one of the best decisions I've ever made to do that, even though I love God, and He is my God, not soccer. But, you know, just to say that I think He'll forgive me for this one, because it was the first half was really great. I mean, it was back and forth. It ended 2-2.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and even if they hadn't have won, I mean, they already looked good, but even if they weren't going to win, I was like, well, at least this has been competitive. And then after that, it was just like a switch got flipped, and they were just, in the second half, just bang, 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 bang. I mean, Noni Madueke got a hat trick, all of which were assisted by Cole Palmer, so he also, that's his own stat of a hat trick of assists.
Yeah.
Which I think they said is only like the 5th or 6th time that's ever happened in Premier League history, I think, or something, that one player has assisted another player in every hat trick that they got a hat trick out of. And also Joao Felix, who I'm a pretty big fan of. I know a lot of fans at Chelsea don't really like him. Got transferred over this week due to all the problems with Conor Gallagher leaving to go to Atletico Madrid, who I've wanted gone for a while. So it's funny, I'm kind of the opposite of the fan base in that regard. Well, some people do not like him, and so I was happy for that trade to finally go through, and he actually scored in this one too. So, yeah, it's kind of like, I mean, I literally tweeted, you know, the celebration at the end of Return of the Jedi that was added by George Lucas later, of just like winning a game.
Yeah.
It's almost like, oh my God, we won the championship.
Yeah.
Which, well, not we, but
I know it's not the first game of the season, but a great early
game
for
because
them.
I mean, nobody expected him to win the Manchester City game, and so it was like, yeah, okay, sure, that they would not win that makes sense, but that they could still beat Wolverhampton this bad. And I actually kind of like Wolverhampton. They'd be one of my other more favorite-ish teams in the top like 5 or 6 in the Premier League. Yeah, that you got to do it to him. I mean, but no, it was bad. I mean, and I don't know whether that's going to be one of these things where it's just Wolverhampton was that bad or Chelsea was that good.
Yeah.
I'm kind of bad with judging that, especially early in a season. But they did just come off of a 2-0 win in a Conference League game earlier this week too. So, as in Chelsea did. So, which that was against a team who wasn't all that good anyway.
Yeah.
But hopefully this is also proof that things are starting to gel with Enzo Maresca as the new manager, and that things will be better. No matter what, it was It was what was nice about it. First half was like really competitive, really good, and then the second half it was like, oh, you don't have to worry. They've got this taken care of. So
right,
but that was nice. I think there was a game either on my birthday or like right after last year, and I don't remember how that went, but I don't think they won. So that I remember, maybe they did. I don't know, but anyway, that was nice. Matter of fact, I'm gonna look that up. But
well, good deal.
So,
I know you're happy about them doing well here early in the season. I know obviously the NFL season's also right around the corner.
Yeah.
So expect to hear little thoughts about that here or there moving forward from us. Although, again, it is episode 98, and I don't want to spoil or get into too much. We're definitely going to see the end of certain things and the beginning of other things. That's all I'll say with our podcast realm and interest. But we'll get into that soon. But again, episode 98, Levi. I know we've been saying it here while we've been in the 90s, but we're climbing on up there. Almost to triple digits. Crazy to think about. We can reflect on all that upon getting there. But first, you know what time it is. Here we go. It's time for the Blue Plate Special.
Hi, Audrey. Norma, have a cup of coffee, please. Sure.
I'll have what she's having.
Hey, who wants a large pepperoni? Coming up!
Noni Madueke serving up some of that crow to eat at Molyneux is right here. By the way, I forgot to say about Noni Madueke. I just told you this off air a while ago. I don't think I just said this a while ago.
Yeah.
When we were just talking about it on the podcast, but that he had tweeted some stuff put on Instagram story talking about this place is SHIT about Wolverhampton sometime in the last week or so.
Yeah.
Or something like that pretty recently, and people were like, oh, you need to apologize for that, and he did, and then he scored 3 on them. So
there you go.
Anyway, so that was funny, but yeah.
So we've got an update of a news item we talked about last time to talk about here in the Blue Plate Special, along with discussion of 2 new releases. Just go ahead and preview what that is. Alien Romulus and Blink Twice, before memorializing the death of one of the great screen titans of acting, Gena Rowlands. Rowlands? How do you say that last name?
Rowlands.
Rowlands. Oh, my wow. Is there just certain things you're just like, you've said a bunch, and all of a sudden you're like, wait, how do I say that? I don't know. It happens to me sometimes. So, first things first, though. We talked about it last time, the whole Joaquin Phoenix, Todd Haynes drama that was going on over, of course, Joaquin Phoenix dropping out of Todd Haynes' movie that it seems as though Joaquin Phoenix, if not exactly helped co-conceive, helped co-write, and then they were right about to shoot it when, just less than a week out that Phoenix dropped out of the movie.
Yeah.
And this was, I think I might have even predicted a version of this was going to happen when we were talking about it last time, that there's probably going to be dirt that is aired about Joaquin Phoenix as a way for the industry to kind of check him and police him, and people who have worked on other things and maybe problems or situations he's been in the past, and that's exactly what happened. I'm reading from a Hollywood Reporter article that was published almost 2 weeks ago now. The Hollywood Reporter article is called "Joaquin Phoenix's Last-Minute Exit Sparks Huge Amount of Outrage Among Hollywood Producers." The Oscar winner departed Todd Haynes' gay romance drama just 5 days before production began at a more a move insiders say makes legal action against him a likely outcome. So, as it says here, quote, there's been a huge amount of outrage, quote, end quote, says one studio executive. The reaction from Hollywood producers to Phoenix's last-minute departure, which left cast and crew in a lurch, and now opens the actor up to the possibility of legal action, according to sources. The departure was particularly surprising, given that Phoenix's first brought the project to Haynes, and the long-term producers at Killer Films, headed by Christine Vachon and Pamela Koffler. The untitled film, also starring Captain America: Brave New World's Daniel Ramirez, was said to focus on an intense gay romance in the 1930s. According to multiple sources, Phoenix got cold feet in the lead-up to the production, though the reasons remain murky. A rep for Phoenix did not respond to a request for comment. Two sources tell THR that he threatened to leave Ridley Scott's Napoleon unless the master filmmaker, Paul Thomas Anderson, was brought in to do rewrites. Placated, he stayed aboard the project, and it arrived in theaters late last year. Just as no spoilers, but our next episode is literally about a PTA movie, so we'll be talking about PTA again soon. What was your reaction to hearing that news?
Why wasn't it better? I didn't see it, but I don't know. There's certain movies like that
they are what they're going to be.
Film Twitter is going to like beloved just because they want to.
Well, Ridley Scott's got a big fan
and
of anyways.
it became a meme of, you think you're so great just because you have boats. That's literally something a kindergartner would write. Yeah. So, like, I doubt that PTA wrote that. Unless that was like, he was like premier hash hound, like totally out of his mind.
Well,
bad day at the office.
You know, a story like this draws attention to the fact that, like, somebody like Paul Thomas Anderson's not like a workman for hire as far as a screenwriter, but then it's like, that he came in to do some rewrites on a script like this, and it makes you wonder how much of this is even more frequent than is often reported, like, because I don't think there were any real flashes of this as news until this story come out. So it was like, wait a minute, is PTA like going in and script doctoring other movies?
Yeah.
I know, like, and they're credited on it, but like the Coen brothers coming on to do rewrites on Bridge of Spies, I think, for Spielberg, I know. Another version of that. As Phoenix once told 60 Minutes, Anderson Cooper, he's usually, quote, petrified when he takes on a lead role because before he shoots, he's, quote, nervous. He won't be able to, quote, find the right kind of place to express his ideas.
What that literally doesn't mean anything. That statement.
Yeah, I mean,
like,
I think and I think
I get the nervous part, but the quote, "I don't have any way to express my ideas."
Yeah. Your
ideas.
It's literally you're the lead of the movie.
Yeah,
in these cases, too,
right?
so
and it's like your ideas. I mean, yeah, an actor does bring so much to a role. Don't get me wrong, but you're not the boss exactly here.
Well,
I mean,
and there's lots of different types of film productions, but most film productions, when you start day one, you've already had a lot of the tough conversations about the script and everything, and you're going into, like, you've already rehearsed, usually, if the director does that, and, like, you already kind of sort of know what the movie is before you head into it. Now, other directors work different ways, but, like, most conventional, things like that, that's the way it works. It did also draw attention, this Hollywood Reporter article, to other instances in Hollywood history that are similar to this. I'd never heard of this. It says, in 1993, a court found that Kim Basinger breached a verbal contract to star in Mainline Pictures film Boxing Helena, with Basinger ordered to pay the company at least $8.92 million in damages. That ruling was overturned the next year, with Basinger eventually settling with Mainline in 1995, agreeing to pay $3.8 million. I've heard a version of this.
Speaking of Kim Basinger, won't say any more on that for now.
Others have cited Bruce Willis dropping out of a never-finished Disney film, Broadway Brawler, mid-production, after which he had to do 3 Disney movies at below his market rate as a make-good. That situation worked out in everyone's favor, with 2 of these films ended up being hits, Armageddon and The Sixth Sense. So literally he had to do those as a make-good with Disney's
films.
Yeah. I wonder if that other one's The Kid, that one.
That's what I was thinking, is that baseball movie.
Yeah.
Because Hudson Hawk would have been before all that anyway, and that probably wasn't a Disney movie, but that was one I was thinking. Do you know what the plot of Hudson Hawk is, by the way? Every time I look into that, I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, it's nonsense. But that's Bruce Willis. So. Anyway.
But like, I mean, it is interesting that like we talked about Bruce Willis in The Sixth Sense back when we did the podcast of it last year. But like, that's a massive hit movie for him. One of the movies he'll always be remembered for, and I'm sure in the end he's probably happy he did that because he worked with Shyamalan after that a few times. But like, it's just crazy sometimes how things like this can lead to projects like that being realized.
Yeah.
The controversy comes, this is what we were talking about or predicting last week, as Phoenix prepares to take the Joker filet-à-deux to Venice and likely to other festivals as well. The Haynes movie drama could cast a pall over the press tour, though Phoenix historically does little solo press, even for his splashy roles, and tends to wait until later in award season when he does. On Joker, he and Warner's declined most major requests, and the film's Los Angeles premiere featured no red carpet interviews from anyone, as Joker faced its own controversy over fears that the film would inspire violence. Ended up being $1 billion hit, and he won an Oscar. That's really about it. We'll say this. Just this sentence.
Film will inspire violence.
Indeed, the actor's
very loud indeed. Yeah.
Indeed, the actor's reticent attitude and squirmy reputation have not seemed to hurt his Oscar chances, and sometimes have even seemed to help him with voters. Phoenix's elaborate hoax that he was becoming a rapper, derided by many when she undertook it in 2010, did not stop him from getting nominated for Best Actor for The Master 2 years later. So the ink is still wet on this whole situation. That he might open himself up to legal problems. I don't think we exactly even talked about that last time. Also, although we did predict his reputation among producers and among people in Hollywood would likely take a hit.
Mm-hmm.
I think it goes without saying that, like, if you sign contracts, you are legally bound to, and you're probably going to get paid money. He's probably not going to make, obviously, wasn't going to make a ton of money on this, obviously, but like, I think we would agree that, you're kind of opening yourself up to legal action if you're not going to fulfill what literally you brought to Todd Haynes to do.
Yeah, because that's all these people that are sitting, just sitting around not getting paid. And
working class people.
Right. So, I don't really have a whole lot of respect for that. And I know we talked about, the idea that, oh, man, he's really going to have to, he's like, oh, man, I'm really going to have to do all this stuff. And it's like, well, first of all, it's not real. It's a movie. Secondly, you were just in Beau's Afraid, which is like the level of like Laura Dern and Inland Empire for a man. And I actually not quite to that level because there's a lot more that gets asked of women in movies than men. But this is, and that's always pretty much the case, I feel like.
There's still some pretty...
Well, Harvey Keitel
that's
in
generally
Bad
always
Lieutenant
true,
is one.
But there are a few things in Beau's Afraid that are like...
But no, I was going to say that's pretty close. And so, I don't know, if you can do that, I'm kind of like, what's stopping us here from... And I don't know, that's his own deal, but it just makes you wonder.
Again, not to make a lot of his situation, he seems to be a generally pretty anxious person. That, we've talked about that the signs have been there for years for that. But it's like, you didn't think about this maybe
also he came to Haynes with the project. Yeah. So that's what's so confusing is it's like, at what point did you not think about what you're doing here? I don't know. Yeah. But I think that's interesting that a lot of, I said, unnamed sources are really pissed off. And like I said, even more stories about him are probably going to start coming out. Not even stuff that's like really bad, just like of him being weird and hard to work with, which we already know about anyway. So
this story will be ongoing. And Overlapping Dialogue will do our best to cover the story for you, our faithful listeners.
Speaking of anxiety, Alien Romulus.
So this and Blink Twice were kind of the last movies of the summer, so to speak, because obviously September's kind of a weird month because it's like kind of the soft start of the fall movie season. October is really the big opening for that.
So you'll have, of course, Beetlejuice, which is coming up in about 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. A week from when you're hearing this.
And I think we talked about that's kind of a bridge between...
Yes, because it's like kind of a summer-ish movie as far as the sensibility of what it is.
The size of it.
But also inherently gothic and more fallish in what its visuals are.
Well, usually too, and like holiday movies usually come out like a week or like a month before,
right?
Because usually the Christmas movies come out like as far as like movies set during
November.
Christmas and November, so they can play for
pretty much right after October. Yeah.
So this is kind of a version of that because I'm sure Beetlejuice is going to be like one of the big series of costume ideas this year for Halloween. I would imagine. So, anyways, Alien Romulus. Of course, newest film in the Alien franchise, directed by a director we really think a lot of, Fede Alvarez. It's the 9th installment in the Alien franchise, technically set between the events of Alien and Aliens. Stars Kaylee Spaney, who was in Civil War earlier this year, David Johnson, and I'm going to kind of make a point about this, a bunch of other guys and gals of various memorability. Follows a group of downtrodden young space colonists in pursuit of better life conditions who encounter hostile creatures while scavenging a derelict space station. If that sounds familiar, that's because it is. But that's okay. I mean, I think most people... And the Alien franchise is one of the most interesting franchises because you have certain franchises like, say, the Planet of the Apes movies, which we've talked a lot about on here, of course. Go listen to our series on them, that have they've had literal reboots and totally said, all right, this is a new thing of this. Alien has a continuity behind it that is still ongoing ever since the late 70s when the very first one came out. This very much kind of, in quotes, is continuing or between stories of that. But one thing that I like about the Alien franchise is, and sometimes this can open itself up to criticisms in certain ways, but that it's like, okay, we all know what the DNA of an Alien movie is, and there are enough variations on them where we've kind of sort of seen, like, I feel like almost every permutation of an Alien movie, but every new director and the possibility of every new cast offers the chance to open the door to be something a little different.
Yeah. And
this is something I would say just that, a little different, that Fede Alvarez brings to it, and his sense of action and his sense of set pieces that he's displayed in, the Evil Dead movie that he did.
Yeah.
Or certainly we're big fans, of course, of the Don't Breathe movies.
Yeah.
He directed the first one and I think co-wrote the second one.
And I quite liked, actually, Girl in the Spider's Web, which I know a lot of people were half and half on.
It is interesting to think about, like, other than the Don't Breathe movies, like, all those other things he's done are part of some other franchise or tradition of movie that already has existed. We can get into now, like, what we thought of this. I thought this was quite good. I would give it, like, a 3.5 out of 5, I would say.
I'd say the same thing.
I would say, like, the biggest downside of the movie is I actually like Kaylee Spaney and David Johnson and their dynamic. She's like this... poor, basically person who's working on this space colony who's looking to get out of that. And David Johnson plays like this android that has been with her family for some time. And their relationship I thought was interesting. The rest of the cast was pretty like, okay, I don't really care about you. The movie's not doing much for me to care about you. Let's just set our watches for when you all start slowly being killed off. And so, and in that regard, I think that's one of the weaknesses of the movie is that it didn't do enough for me to care about the overall ensemble, even though the main two actors I did.
You didn't care about, there's something in the effing water.
There's going to be a lot of people that try to, trace how this fits into the larger Weyland-Yutani alien mythos, and this is something that I think it's cool that these movies have that stuff, but I don't personally go to them to fill in the blanks with that. I don't really fundamentally care about that. But I think the setting, the mood is all like pitch perfect alien movie, in that tradition of movie. And I think the action and the set pieces, especially like the third act, is really well done.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is why this was made, and this is Fede Alvarez's take on the Alien franchise. Where do you land on Alien Romulus?
I agree, and I'd give it the same rating. I think I enjoyed it a little more than you did, or even the people we saw it with. But Yeah, I mean, to speak a little bit about the company stuff in the movie, and I mean, I don't really care to talk about the Ian Holm.
Yeah, so there's a thing where Ian Holm's
I don't care.
likeness is used. Not to, well, it's not obviously the same character because he would have been destroyed and blown up.
Which is why it kind of doesn't matter, because it's like, well, it also isn't exactly totally exhibiting the same attitudes, or it's almost more of like a. And I think this is one of the things I like about the movie, but you could do this without this, is about the company, and this kind of goes into that, is that it's saying, oh, the things we did in the past are not good. We do need to destroy this thing. Mm-hmm. But also, I still secretly have this plan that is going to do this, and it's like, this whole kind of corporate, we're going to whitewash ourselves, and we're sorry about what we did, kind of similar to what we're going to talk about Blink Twice, too, but about, we're sorry, but are we really? And we're actually using this as a blah, blah, an attempt to blah, 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 and do this. But, yeah, I mean, and I do like that this is very specific in terms of, like, showing what an actual, like, colony of Weyland-Yutani really looks like. Because obviously you had that in Aliens, where it was already taken over by the aliens, and it was kind of whatever. But I did like how this was very much like, let's see what it actually looks like to work in these mines and to be colonizing these places. And then it's like, you worked yourself out of this basically in slavery. Mm-hmm. And then, never mind, you can't do that. So 7 more years that you got to work. And
I mean, these movies have always had a strong anti-corporate bent.
Right,
obviously.
but I just appreciated that randomly as I think I'd heard this, a lot of people were saying that the first act wasn't as good. I actually thought it was one of the better things about it. I thought the kind of middle of the movie was where it kind of faltered.
I would agree.
And I'll talk a little bit here in just a moment about the new android character who I actually thought was very interesting, and other people even that I know personally didn't like.
Well, I do agree. Yeah. Don't you think that it was like the Michael Fassbender performance in David in the last 2 of the movies has already become, I don't know if iconic is quite the right word,
it's
but
its
like
own thing,
very like memorable for a lot of people. And a lot of that's due to just Fassbender being a great actor, and that is a tough shoes to fill.
And part of the genius of that was that it was known from the beginning that character was an android, kind of like Lance Henriksen in Aliens. But I feel like that was a better version.
I guess because I feel like Ian Holmes was obviously that was treated as a surprise or a twist in the original movie, but a lot of these now are they tell you from the beginning,
right? And so that's fine, but as far as the company stuff, I mean, and this is all just obvious, but it's like, you rewatch the original Alien, and you think about the deftness with which that story was told and the economy, and that it can say everything that has been said since about the Weyland-Yutani Corporation or companies in general in one exchange with the mother computer. Yeah. To that moment when it's saying what's the actual directive, and it says everything, and then that little addendum that just says crew expendable. Yeah. And it's like, that's everything that needs to be said about this company in one line of not even dialogue with a computer of like saying, we don't really care what happens to you because we want this, and it's all about money and this and our experiments with these new technologies and these new organisms and blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, it's just like, it's fine, but it's like and this is an obvious thing, we're just never going to get back to that point. Now, talk a lot, of just the genius and the economy and the wit of the storytelling just can't, and it's impossible. I mean, in its own way. However, I do like that it continues to develop that in its own way, because I'm like, well, yeah, what else are we going to do other than just run it into the ground? But yeah, the android character in this, I mean, and you're right. I think it's good to compare him to the Fassbender character, because I honestly wasn't thinking as much about that. About, you're right, how iconic that whole character.
Well, and I
been.
think too that's honestly the biggest innovation the most recent 2 of the movies done was provide that character more actual screen time, and that like to actually put a character like that more at the forefront of the story as opposed to being this kind of background figure.
So David Johnson was the Andy character. He's apparently on some HBO show from Britain called Industry that I've never heard of.
I've heard of it. Yeah,
It's like an investment bank or something.
so fun. Let's do more shows about that kind of world.
Anyway,
Not really.
and then he was in a movie called Rye Lane. Never heard of, but then he was in this. Randomly, something I think's really strange is he was named a 2023 Bright Young Thing by Tatler. You know, the British tabloid magazine.
Yeah. Okay, well, good for
Bright
him.
Young Thing. Okay,
That's weird.
Anyway, I think he's really good in this.
Yeah.
And I think his performance is really good because something that was great about Ian Holm that is obviously different, and somebody talked about this in the documentary Memory that I just rewatched, or that I watched about the making of the movie here recently, of the first movie, Alien. That there was this lady that was talking about how, like, he was programmed to be an a-hole by somebody.
Yeah.
You know, and like they took the time to be like, yes, this is the way we want this person to be. And how fascinating that is as a character, that you just think he's a weird, cold, isolated jerk until you realize, you know, at the end of the second act, that, oh, wait a second, he's actually like a daggum robot. And one of the best moments in that original movie is when Yaphet Kotto's like, F, Ash is a GD robot. Like, just the blatantness and directness of that quote is amazing. They also talked about that in that documentary real quickly about Yaphet Kotto and who's great in everything, by the way, and Harry Dean Stanton, who's also great in everything, by the way. About how they're like, why don't you just like freeze him? They keep saying over and over, and it's like the most common sense thing that actually, like, yeah, you could just do that, and that would kind of save this whole situation. Now, the reason that's not happening is because the company's Android is stopping that every step of the way to try to get this through, you know. But anyway, the thing that was so that was what was interesting about that character when you actually think about it. It's like, yeah, he was literally programmed to be this way.
Yeah.
This, it feels a little bit more like, oh, he seems like and I mean, that's another, and this is a problem I have with the movie too. What we literally just talked about on the last podcast was this idea of treating, you know, these computers as people. So what's funny is we kind of have this attitude, this, you know, negative attitude towards that one British guy, part of the group, who's like mad at him because some other android caused the death of his brother in a mining accident. And the movie treats it as, oh, he's such a bigot. And it's like, yeah, but it's literally, and of course then also in its own way, linking David Johnson to being black.
Yeah, right.
And that, and it's kind of like, okay.
Yeah, because
like,
this is kind of the first weird thing to say, android of color, really, you can think of in these movies.
Yes, and so that's a problem in its own way, that it's still trying to justify computers as people, and say he's just a computer, who cares?
I mean, that's like, now kind of the default position of a lot of these types of characters.
Right. So that's a problem. However, what works about it is that the performance is so good, and that it's a difference of, like, literally him fighting between, oh, am I actually loyal to my family, in quotes, or what I'm told to do by my manufacturers. Yeah. Which is something that actually is never the case, and that's what's kind of brilliant about the David character in the last two movies of Prometheus and Covenant, is that he actually is kind of evil the whole time. And that it's like, oh, you were surprised by that by the end, because Prometheus is him in this very particular role that's this kind of evolution that's very complex, which I think is, and that movie's really good anyway. So, you know, but the Alien Covenant, you find out, actually he just did all these experiments to try to, like, combine DNA of these aliens with the Noomi Rapace character from Prometheus. Yeah. And it's like, wow, you really are a sick F, aren't you? But that, and so that, and shh, as he said.
I genuinely, I'll be honest, I don't remember much about Alien Covenant. I remember James Franco died at the beginning, and I liked that.
I was happy with that. And then I actually remember a random amount about that movie just because I've seen it twice. You haven't seen it since theater, have you?
No, and I have seen Prometheus a few times. So
yeah, I've seen it twice, so I have
remember that a little
seen
better.
It again at some point. But anyway, there's the ending when it's like him putting down Catherine Waterston to go to sleep, and it's like, oh crap, and
do you go to these movies for the, like, mythology / world building of them? Because I do think it is actually more interesting than I maybe made it sound earlier.
Yeah, I think when it was Prometheus and Alien Covenant, yes.
Well, I feel like it was like trying to intentionally go more in that direction.
Right. And just the opening of Prometheus when it's like the space jockey human whatever
engineer or
human
something?
the engineers whatever they're called. When it like kills itself to like put human being like DNA in the water of Earth, and it like shows the DNA going together and it shows the name of the. I'm like, this is like one of the greatest openings in any movie ever. I still think that's like really great. And so, in its own way, that movie was kind of controversial at the time. I know you remember this because we went to see it, but that it was kind of controversial at the time because it was like, this was supposed to be totally like a prequel to Alien, and it's like, it kind of actually is way too much of one, in my opinion. And that's one of the minor problems with that movie, is that it focuses a little too much on those things. But yeah, I mean, it's still. But what is great about that, it still does engage in that, while also creating all this new imagery and new implications about what the engineers are and what all this is.
Well, also filling in some of the blanks of the mystery horror of the first movie too, though.
Yes,
that was left in, that where you're feeling like you're finding the corpses of like these dead godlike figures in the first one, and the horror and the mystery of that, some would argue, has been taken away through. Yes, but I still find
the imagery of the actual events of Prometheus to be so horrific in itself that you're right. I think it does, but also it's like, yeah, but this is so screwed up and disgusting that I'm still like, yeah, this is still weird.
As a Fede Alvarez fan, how did you take him?
Well, then that's where I was going to go next. Is that, I mean, he's made one of, I think, the best Alien movies in a while on a technical level. Not that, because I actually think Prometheus is really well-made movie. Really, Scott actually making that actually, and Alien Covenant's fine, but it's kind of forgettable and whatever. There is a certain point in Alien Covenant, though, if you do remember, where it's like a very well-lit planet, and it's trying to do the horror in the daylight thing, but a very well-lit planet. And like, there's the famous image of the alien hanging onto the ship as it's going, and it's like that just looks inherently goofy to me, of like an alien hanging onto a ship in the middle of daylight, and it's like, oh, I'm gonna get you, and it's like, that's just kind of weird and stupid. Whereas Prometheus, it was able to do both things very well, whereas all the other movies are always in darkness, so it's like, so that was different and that was nice. But anyway, with this, I mean, Fede Alvarez is one of the better thriller action directors, I think, in more recent years. It reminds me a lot of Wes Craven, especially in like, because I think Scream is one of the most well-made horror movies ever. Anyway, as far as just moment to moment, wow, this is like on another level. And it reminds me a lot of that, his filmmaking style. I think particularly, and he didn't even direct it, Rodo Ciegues, or however you say his name. I apologize. His co-writer of this movie actually directed Don't Breathe 2, and there's still moments from that I think about a lot on a filmmaking level. There's one really long take in that is really great. It's kind of a hidden long take too. It's not like, oh, we're very falling flashy, around, and it's like very kind of hidden. And so, but still, that being part of his oeuvre, along with Girl in the Spider's Web is really well made. And even the Evil Dead, that first Evil Dead movie, which I didn't care too much about either way, was still pretty well made. So going into this, obviously it looks a lot like the first Alien movie. As far it tries to go more back to the production design of that, more from the human perspective. Because I find all the like alien planets and all that kind of like engineer and or these alien organisms to be interesting looking, the H.R. Giger-ness of it all. But I also am very fascinated by the human design, kind of retro-futurism of these. And I like that this went back to that, because that's one thing about Prometheus and Alien Covenant I didn't like, was that it was very like whitewashing and kind of, I've used that randomly word twice now, whitewashing. Kind of just like very basic, bland, modern kind of Avatar-esque. And I love those movies too.
Yeah.
But, you know,
but the
design.
future, the first one,
Right.
is one of the most memorable aspects of it, and this definitely is going back more to that.
That's what I think is so great about this is it tries to do that again, which is in its own way inspired by the video game, which I think I talked about that last time, but Alien Isolation, which he actually was a big fan of, so that's why that kind of goes into that.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And so that's all kind of linked together. I mean, of course, there's a certain formulaic nature to the xenomorph coming out and starting to kill people. I wasn't as impressed by that stuff. Kind of in the middle, it really started to kick off though in the final act. I thought when more aliens started showing up, and then it was with the stuff with the spoiler, the baby engineer stuff.
All that set too amongst the backdrop of like this space station is going to crash into the rings of the planet.
Right.
I thought that was a really great set piece and way to have this like background,
this cataclysmic event that's about to happen.
And then also that whole like elevator shaft sequence was terrific. Then there's the whole thing with like using the
zero gravity
acid and the zero gravity. I mean, all that stuff's really, I think, well executed.
When it was that point
scenes.
where it was the zero gravity and Kaylee Spaney was literally blasting them with the machine gun, was just like, yes, movies. Like, and even the get away from her, you big moment was pretty funny and organically put in of like that British guy kept calling him that, and then he said it
what did you make of that overall ensemble?
I think it's okay. I mean, I thought Kaylee Spaney was really great in Civil War. I think David Johnson is really good in this. Everybody else is kind of whatever. And also, I mean, we don't always have to expect that necessarily. But if you actually, because I was thinking about this, if you go back and look at the original Alien movie, and even Aliens, but we'll get to that in a second. Alien, all those actors are like bang, bang, bang. All these people from the 70s that are like, because can you think of a better cast than Sigourney Weaver? Really pretty good. Tom Skerritt as your captain, great. John Hurt.
We were just
Ian
watching
Holm,
Heaven's Gate last night, and I was thinking about how much Tom Skerritt reminded me of Chris Christopherson.
Yeah, that's kind of weird that him and then John Hurt's in that. Harry Dean Stanton, Veronica Cartwright. Like, what do you even do? I mean, how can you top that? It's impossible. It's like, but even Aliens has, of course, Michael Biehn.
You mentioned him earlier.
Lance Henriksen.
Bill Paxton.
Bill Paxton is, he's fine, I guess. He's kind of annoying in that movie, but that's kind of what's funny about it. Yeah. Even though, what's the guy that works for the corporation? He was in Mad About You.
Paul Reiser.
I mean, it has just a lot of different people in it. Also, that one lady that's in a lot of James Cameron's movies, the Hispanic lady. I can't remember her name. Jeanette Goldstein. Yeah, it's Vasquez. So, that movie just has a really good cast, and it's like, you can't really... So, there hasn't been one like those two since. So, it's kind of like, that's kind of just par for the course. We don't really ever have great alien casts anymore.
Yeah, I would say that's honestly something that needs to happen again to make my interest overall tick up a notch or two.
Right.
But because I think if that had a cast I cared about, then this would have been like a 4, maybe even flirted with 4.5 star execution of this world. Yeah. But not having that, honestly, just made me kind of shrug and go, you know what, like, I'm glad that it's getting back to the roots in some ways of what these movies can be, but at the same time, if you don't make me care about the characters a lot outside of the main two, then,
Before we move on, last kind of part here to talk about, what do you think about the ultimate kind of MacGuffin of the movie, or kind of the realization that they're trying to use the blood and kind of biology of the facehuggers and the alien xenomorphs to kind of obtain immortality, and also the engineer baby as a final boss villain?
Well, you had the like trying to achieve immortality.
Did it go to the like final boss, Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, lever? Look, a lever, hamburger. But anyway, what do you think about all that?
Fine. I think it's just I didn't really care about any of that on a fundamental
Well, we
level.
kind of already saw
said.
that, with the those like whale creatures in Avatar 2 about like fighting Alzheimer's and like you have their like enzymes in their brain, like so that's also kind of an Avatar.
And I think too that one of the fundamental differences is like this is at least for me. The alien world, I'm not looking for like wonder and like the like humanistic like themes that the Avatar movies put forth.
Yes.
This is just purely horror and survival and like I think they try to approach other science fiction ideas that sometimes like stuff like that I'm like I don't think this quite fits into this because we all know it's all going to cynically go back to it's for the corporation, it's it's like that's always where the pit of these movies
don't
goes
let
to.
the big bugs bite.
So like I don't know. I was just kind of I didn't really care about that either good or bad. I was just like kind of whatever about it. But
the engineer baby though was something to see. That was pretty screwed up. There is that great moment when like the camera kind of the Kaylee Spain character kind of moves up. Or one of the characters. No, it was the other character that got pregnant from the thing. Yeah. Stands up and it's like in the background, hanging on the like wall, and it's like, yeah. So, and dadgum, like these things need to quit growing so fast. I'm sick of all this. Like, oh man, that was randomly played by like a really tall basketball player from that. Like, yeah. Oh, did you say that already?
No, I said I could see that.
Oh yeah,
like,
I thought you said I said that already.
No.
I was like, oh okay. Yeah, but so it was like some Eastern European basketball player was that character, or in the suit. I did also appreciate they tried to do more suit work on this stuff, and I had heard that. But yeah, it was good. A little better than the movie we're about to talk about, which I thought was, but also was more interesting. Which is Blink Twice.
Well, yeah,
don't blink twice. It's all right.
This is trying to say some things about the real world. Obviously, Blink Twice.
The real world in quotes. Yeah. But.
Psychological thriller. I think this is the directorial debut of Zoe Kravitz, who of course is actress, been around for some time now.
Yeah,
I think it is first movie.
Obviously, daughter of Lenny Kravitz.
And
Lisa
Bonet, I believe.
And Zoe Kravitz has always been good in everything I've ever seen her in.
Yeah, she was a really good Catwoman, obviously, relatively
in Fury
recently.
Road, she was good in that. She was in also Into the Spider-Verse as Mary Jane. I don't remember that, but
this movie was originally called Pussy Island. We should just say. And then I remember when we laughed about it, like there's no like.
Oh, and
what?
she played Angel in X-Men First Class. I forgot that. Yeah. But,
so just go through the cast of this real quick. Naomi Ackie, who I don't believe I've really seen before.
Yeah, I haven't either.
Said she was in Rise of Skywalker. I'll try not to remember anything about that movie. Channing Tatum, of course, biggest name really in this. Christian Slater, Simon Rex, Adria Arana.
Oh, Simon Rex, that's who that was. I was sitting there the whole movie trying to think, who is
Haley
that?
Joel Osment, our old friend David from AI, Artificial Intelligence. Kyle MacLachlan, old favorite, of course. Gina Davis and Aaliyah Shawkat. Basically, it's about.
Did you probably mention Levon Hawke, which was the son of?
I don't think I did.
Ethan Hawke is that one kid that gets punched in the face and gets his head blown off. Spoiler.
Yeah, he looks like an exceptionally handsome person. Is it also Uma Thurman's son too? Okay, so it's like those two people.
Yep. So Maya Hawke's brother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, Naomi Ackie and Aaliyah Shawkat's characters are these like really struggling, kind of barely getting by, 20-something, maybe 30-something. Well, they probably are in their early 30s, but basically 20-something peoples whose lives are not really going anywhere, who basically get invited by this character named Slater King, played by Channing Tatum, who invites them basically to this island. He's like this canceled billionaire type, and he invites them to this island where debauchery ensues, and they have a lot of fun, and they're checked out, but actually evil stuff is happening on this island. This movie had I think a pretty promising trailer.
Yeah. As always.
Usually
that's the way it goes these days.
And it's a movie that, let me just say up front, I liked fine enough. I would say it's pretty squarely 3 out of 5 stars. I would give this. It reminded me a lot of Saltburn, and to talk about a lot of the specifics, we get into some spoilers with Saltburn, so I'm not going to try to spoil. I actually think this would make a good double feature one day to talk about both these movies. But both of the movies are like these cautionary tales about how rich people are evil, but like so are the poor people who are trying to get in on their games, and I find that to be a very confounding statement to make. But B, also, like...
You're saying that in the case of this movie says that, you think?
Yeah, okay. I think so, to an extent it says that.
I agree, I'm just making
Saltburn's more... The narrative is more specifically about that.
Rich people.
And about, like, an interloper in the form of Barry Keoghan's character who's, like, actually lying about his background to get into the world that he's in, and that kind of comes as
literally like Barry Lyndon.
Twists. Yeah, similar.
Yeah.
Although I think it is. I'm glad you said that, but also want to laugh a movie like that getting put in the same class as Barry.
Oh no,
Lyndon, I know what you mean.
Well, I was also thinking about Barry Lyndon, Barry Keoghan, but anyway.
This is a random place to go with this. Because I've journaled about it, I've thought a lot about it the last few days. I'm really, really getting sick of movies about wealthy people. Yeah. Like how many things are made about rich people all the time as like the background for these types of stories. That was one of me anyways, speak for myself, like one of my ongoing criticisms of a show I overall like Succession, that it was just like about the lifestyles of the rich and famous, and aren't they so evil?
Knives Out movies, which this kind of reminds me of too.
But we kind of like getting a look behind the curtain.
I don't.
I think weirdly this whole subgenre, and I know something like The Menu was like, and that had even some of the director Mark Malloy or
Mark Malloy,
is like a director on Succession who did The Menu also,
which I did hear was good, but who knows?
Yeah, I do actually want to see it because I want to take a random deep dive into this. As much as I'm sick of it, like I actually want to maybe at some point write about or have something bigger to say about these whole types of movies.
John Leguizamo is also in that, so we got to do it.
Yeah.
He's fat and he runs like a girl.
Weirdly, all of these things, and they all vary in terms of how much of a horror/thriller they are, feel to me like a randomly negative influence of Get Out. Now, Get Out, I think, is pretty great, and
this reminded me a lot of that.
Stands out as something that is a really great version of this type of story. That obviously is much more explicitly about race in a way that a lot of these aren't. There's some unspoken things about race in this movie, but it's not like exactly a part of the narrative.
Right.
Again, this movie in of itself did not exactly annoy me, but I'm a part of a larger series of movies that have been made over the last so many years. It is really getting on my nerves, and it's one of those classic catch-22s because like I know that a lot of the people who own the capital to make movies are obviously rich people, and so that's just a world and a strata of life that is vastly overrepresented in media in general. So I understand that, but I'm also just really sick and tired of it.
Let's get Ethan Hawke in there because he's always doing something random, like, oh, what about this? And a lot more grassroots kind of person. But, and there's other people like that. I'm not just saying.
Yeah, and I just find it to be really.
But what you're referring to are these big studio movies that are made, right? Not independent stuff.
Yeah.
And
it's like trying to have its cake and eat it too, by like feeling like the movie feels as though it's trying to expose like. This is I don't know if you know this, Levi. This is actually what rich people do behind the scenes. Like, so just
not all rich people do that though. That's the thing.
That's true also. But like, it's just
to
like,
defend them for 2 seconds.
But then it's like really, it's got a very to me simple-minded worldview that I will say, and I feel like I'm all over the place on this. There's one scene towards the end with Channing Tatum where he basically gives a monologue that I think is actually a really terrific piece of acting.
I'm sorry.
And it's like,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm not going to
keep doing it. It's actually a little bit after that.
It's like 20 minutes.
Because there was like that moment towards the end where I was like, okay, I get it. And it was kind of going on too long. But then there was like if I watched it, I could point out to you. There's a few moments of acting that are after that I was like, oh, wow, Channing Tatum's actually... can be really
Yeah,
good.
when
if,
he's like,
in the right
okay,
moment.
I'm sorry, you forgive me? It's like...
And
no,
it's
like,
and I know the movie itself is saying like this character's evil. I know it's saying that, but then like it's also the main character. I don't really want to spoil too much. Has been manipulated the whole time and has an even larger history with like this world that was that's a twist. That she then like Barry Keoghan in Saltburn like kind of. It turns out like. This and Saltburn more so than this, but it's like actually they're the real villain of the movie. Him more so in that than her in this. But it's like it tries to like twist the knife a bit too many times. I think actually as far as the direction of it's quite good.
Yeah.
But I think it's a little self-satisfied. I feel like I've been all over the place talking about this, Levi, though you haven't really said too much as far as what you think about Blink Twice.
Yeah, I'm more or less feel the same way. I think I may still like it just slightly more than you do. However, I totally agree about the idea that, we've had enough of this. Oh, rich people, look at them. Like, I don't want to anymore. I'm tired of that.
And they're actually secretly evil. And weirdly, like you said, like it's actually like making them out to be like... in some ways more evil than the narratives
but what's weird, it's like, no, we all know that they're evil, but then this movie's like, hey, did you know rich people are evil and they're actually this evil? It's like, okay, first of all, we already knew they were evil, and no, they're not that bad, or at least most of them, I'm assuming, because even despite people being rich, I doubt that they're all, like, have these death cults and rape cults going on. I mean, I don't know, like, but it's just, and obviously... there are big versions of that in Hollywood, but you usually find that, at least from what I can understand, on a smaller scale of definite instances that these things have happened. But yeah, I'm like, even outside of Hollywood, though, I find that, I don't know, like Warren Buffett, I don't know, I doubt he's like running out raping people every 5 minutes. You know what I mean? It's like...
Do you think these things are done in these vague, abstract ways because there's like they don't have the balls to just do the Michael Jackson movie or the Jeffrey Epstein movie, or the Harvey Weinstein movie?
Or also they find it difficult to put the evil of capitalism in terms other than murder or rape, and just saying actually this is just the way this is just evil, Because, I mean, I went over page 1,000 in Against the Day today. Yay. But anyway, my point of saying that, I was just reading a section about Scarsdale Vibe, real name. Well, he's not a real person, but that is like the big villain of the whole book. Yeah. That he's this, like, big robber baron guy. And, like, throughout the book, I mean, he's done bad things, but, like, for the most part, has just been a guy who loves money and has people killed when he wants to. He's not running around doing all this crazy stuff like in this movie. He's just a guy who's just purely evil, and there's this monologue that he gives to all these rich people, kind of like we just rewatched Heaven's Gate last night, like you were saying, and kind of like the scenes of Sam Waterston in that, of him just, like, giving this whole social Darwinist spiel, and it's like... For some reason, people aren't scared enough by that because they believe in it in an inherent way. I think most people actually do believe in social Darwinism in a very, most average, everyday people, in a big way because capitalism is normal to them.
And they all think that deep down, if things were slightly different, I could be Warren Buffett. Yeah. I could be Bill Gates. I could be this, like, Elon Musk.
And I'm not even, and by the way, just to say politically, I'm not even a, like, totally pro-socialist, pro-communist person either. Just let that be known. I'm somewhere much more in the middle, which is kind of the way our country functions. Yeah. And even though there's a lot of problems with our country about wage gaps and wealth disparities, I still think it works well enough is what it is. Mm-hmm. Because even, and I'm saying poverty in this country is bad, but even still, the impoverished in this country, if you compare to other countries, is like not even close.
I just want to take a quick time out. All that you're saying, we're talking about a movie that Christian Slater's in, by the way. Just to remind ourselves like where we're at.
Yeah, but you know what I'm saying, like, and that's not at all to limit other countries or our own, but just saying that, like, even in America, there's still an overabundance You know, like we were talking about earlier. This is all just to say that, I don't think, and that's what's so weird about this, is it's just, why don't you just explain how, and I guess, like I said, that in its own way is that people have to be like, have their hands held all the way to the finish line of, oh, these people are literally doing definitively illegal and violent things, rather than just they love money and they're going to screw people out of a life.
And the movie kind of also
you know?
like shrugs and says even somebody that's more working class or poor who gets into this world, well, I guess I'd do it too if I was in that. Now
it's like the end of Midsummer. Yeah, it's the same
one
thing,
could argue that, oh no, they're getting their revenge or retribution for what was done to them. First of all, I don't think that's a morally acceptable solution to what the narrative problem is. But it's a kind of just shrugs and says, yeah, live and let live, and I guess I'm going to do a version of this same thing myself, just because I want the nice things of life. So oh well, and it kind of ends on that note, and I'm like, huh, like I don't know. It sounds all this sounds more negative than, but moment to moment in the movie, I was thinking about a lot of this stuff, and just that there's it seems we've had a lot more discussions in the general public about wealth disparity and the rich feasting upon society and whatnot, but this feels like a very slick realization of those things that I don't think is nearly quite as thought out as it thinks it is. But and again, I do think Channing Tatum has some moments, of really like high quality acting where he's the lead of the movie, because he's honestly not been in movies for a while. I know that he was in Fly Me to the Moon this year, which is a movie that I overall liked better, but is also incredibly ridiculous in a lot of ways. Yeah,
and him and Zoe Kravitz are now romantically involved after this movie, which is kind of funny when you think about all the things that happen in it. It's like, okay. Yeah. But
weirdly, she would be more of an example of what this movie's talking about than he would be, because she actually comes from a more, I'm not even trying to bash her or anything, I'm just saying, and I'm sure she would admit this, a more privileged background than he is, but anyways. Yeah. And so, again, I think this is a movie that is fine and I think is well made, but like I'm really scratching my head about exactly what it's trying to say and how that compares to a lot of other things that have been done in recent years with regards to depicting these worlds of wealth and privilege, which is, again, vastly overrepresentative in culture. But at the same time, I think that audiences kind of want to see these worlds because deep down they are like the main character in this movie, and they're willing to be manipulated by people in this world because deep down they still want to see this world depicted,
Same reason what I'm saying, they really truly do believe in social Darwinism in its core, and that they can be a part of that, whereas most people cannot. So, and
something like Barry Lyndon, I feel like, is a very sophisticated version of this type of story made many years ago and about many years before that, about, of course, the ruin that came to a man who tried to live in this world and through his own hubris and arrogance kind of brought about his own demise. One can make a classist argument, I guess, about that, he was never bred into it, so he didn't know how to manage it. So actually, that's what happens when you let poor people be with the rich. Like, I don't think that's exactly what it's saying. I think it's more about his own personal arrogance and hubris of the characters. Yeah. But anyway, anything else to say about Blink Twice?
No.
One last thing before we get into our movies today. We wanted to memorialize, of course, Gena Rowlands. Virginia Catherine Gena Rowlands was her full name.
I think it's Rowlands, isn't it?
I keep going back and
Gena
forth.
Rowlands.
Rowlands,
yeah.
I believe is true.
Yeah. Rowlands.
Passed away on August 14th, age 94. And I think we were just talking about a while back that she was like one of the last actors of the Cassavetes stable. That
Seymour Cassell was kind of, when he passed, was one of the last. Other than Al Rubin, who was a producer and was in some of the movies, he's like probably the biggest person that's still around now. Yeah, that was a part of the Cassavetes kind of orbit.
Yeah.
Which is wild to think there's anybody even still alive from that.
Yeah.
And that Gena Rowlands was alive this long is a miracle in its own way. I know she had a lot of Alzheimer's here recently.
Star of the Notebook, as was a lot of media outlets. I will say there was a lot that were like, no, actually, she was in
Entertainment
these great...
Tonight actually did take some time to show a lot of a good little amount of stuff that was about Cassavetes movies and stuff. But
we both love Cassavetes, Levi even more so than me. How do you even begin to put her legacy into context? Because it's just, I think we would agree she was probably the greatest actress of that era. And I think it's interesting because a lot of other main big actresses, like I'm just going to throw out some names like Jane Fonda or Faye Dunaway or Diane Keaton, were like in a lot of big directors' different things. She is always going to be more known for working with her husband in these kind of handful and a half worth of movies.
Yeah, and to speak about Diane Keaton and especially Faye Dunaway, or if we even want to, and I'm sorry I'm saying this, but I'm just going to be blatant, even if we're going to slum it and go with like Ally McGraw or something, these are all people that you can tell have a very large ego about themselves and the way that they comport themselves as, I am this lead actress in this movie, especially Faye Dunaway. I mean, her whole personality is based on the fact that she's kind of hard to work with, prickly person, and is like, oh, I'm this like...
There's a documentary that just got made about her that a lot of people are talking about.
Yeah.
I know.
And like, oh, I'm Faye Dunaway, and I'm so amazing, and blah, 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 you know. And I feel like Diane Keaton's a version of that, too, in her own way, even though she's a better actress, and I think better.
Had a lot of
Christie's
range, too,
like,
Diane Keaton. She could be in comedy or drama.
Yeah, and I thought Julie Christie was also a version of that. Basically all these people that Warren Beatty had something to do with, I guess. But
also, too...
no, he was in... Yeah, he was in...
The thing about Diane Keaton, I think one of the reasons she's one of the defining actresses of that era is because, like, she was, like, the wife of Michael Corleone in the Godfather movies, then she was the foil to Woody Allen, you know, and then like in that, you know, in Reds, like I mean, she was like a very powerful female presence in some pretty male oriented movies, so I do think she deserves respect. In that regard, but
I'm just saying there's a certain
out of pure acting ability.
Well, then that's what I was going to say. My point of saying all that Rowlands is to say that Rowlands was so selfless. And I mean, every role that she ever played, especially, and I've pretty much only seen her in the Cassavetes movies, but she was in some other stuff too, is like she is willing to just do literally whatever the role calls for. Absolutely no hubris to herself whatsoever. I mean... You think about A Woman Under the Influence, which is the movie that she's going to be most remembered for. I mean, that's the movie that Cassavetes is going to be most remembered for. Other than maybe Faces, which is she's also really great in. That... And then I think even another role that she's just as great in as that is Opening Night, which I'm just a big fan of that
Love
movie.
Streams, I'm...
And I mean, even my favorite of all these is Love Streams. But... especially in A Woman Under the Influence, I think that was a role and a movie that were, I'm not just saying this because people say this about stuff, literally so outside of the box and in another galaxy of like greatness and so ahead of its time that literally the Academy, while nominating both the movie and her, was just like, we don't really know what to do with this because it's so...
It doesn't play to any existing grammar of what American cinema was producing at that time, and really, frankly, even since. I mean, the rawness of that performance in that movie is really, I think, men or women, really, without compared to many things, I feel like you could point to certain things like, say, De Niro in like Raging Bull, and you know, certain performances that are so raw that you're gonna remember them for the rest of your life. But her in that movie, I remember when I first saw Woman Under the Influence and thinking, oh my gosh, like this is obviously one of the best movies of this decade, but also like the whole thing is oriented around her. If she is not as great as she is in that movie, I won't say the movie won't exactly work, but I mean, it's very clearly all invested in her totally. Right. And obviously, one of the reasons the movie's so great is, not one of, the reason the movie's so great is because of her. You know?
Right. And what's so great about that movie, too, is that
And Peter Falk also.
It begins and ends with the same thing, basically, of like, well, yep, that's about it. And it's like, I feel like there is a change by the end of the movie of that both Peter Falk and Gena Rowlands are saying, okay, let's try to even be a little better than we are.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, literally, I feel like it comes at the beginning, and it's like she's already been kind of, in quotes, crazy for like years, you know, and it's kind of like everybody's just now getting onto this.
This does feel like
a
a particular breaking point.
Right,
like,
yes. But at the same time, it's like she clearly exhibits behavior that is strange. That's normally part of her existence as a person. And then the ending of the movie is literally like such a very high wire act of a tone to deal with, of that she tries to commit suicide after this welcome home party, but then the movie kind of ends with her and him getting ready to go to bed, and she's just like, I'm really nuts. And he's like, don't worry about it.
I
mean,
and something that can easily get lost. She was a very funny actress, and finds points in that movie to be funny in the midst of the horror. But then you think about something like Gloria, which is a much more conventional-ish, like, kind of crime drama thriller that he made. How funny she is in that also.
And that gives her a chance to be like a very staunchly motherly figure, while also being like, I can shoot people if I need to, but and then Love Streams, I mean, that's my favorite.
That's
of his
actually
movies,
probably mine too,
and I think it's great. But that movie, I think, is almost like a postmodernist version even of what their whole oeuvre is, to the point where it's kind of hard to even, like, talk about as, like, one of their movies, because it's like, this is so outside of anything. I don't even know what exactly to say about it.
It's usually, she plays, like, a romantic interest in these movies. That one, it's obviously something different because her and Cassavetes are playing brothers and sisters,
right? So that's what I was gonna say too. That's different because it's like a totally different type of relationship. But this is all just to say that, like, really, because if you look, and this is talking about Cassavetes in general, but especially her also, if you just literally were to say, show me what movies can do with nothing.
Yeah, you don't got to build some big set, or you don't got to be on some big sound stage somewhere. It's like in a living room with a camera,
and it's like, this is it. And that really is. I mean, once I saw his movies, they really and I haven't watched them in a few years. Like, I've kind of taken a break from them.
Yeah.
And I've been thinking about wanting to rewatch through all of them again. It really changed my life in a pretty profound way about the way that movies can be made, and have been doing that for people since they were made. But she, I mean, and Cassavetes is great as an actor, he's great as a director, but he was a genius to, more often than not, choose her as the focus, not only because they were married and in love, but also that he had the faith in her to carry entire movies, and she did. I mean,
I think it just speaks to her what a titan she was, that she is spoken in the same breath as him too.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that he wasn't just the grand mastermind who did everything, which is oftentimes how we talk about auteurs or these great directors. But, like, her name is not far behind in terms of what a key collaborator she was, and also a filmmaker in of herself, as far as just And I feel like, goes without saying, I mean, she changed what was possible with screen acting in a pretty fundamental way around this time and this era.
And I mean, like, now movies like The Killing of a Chinese Bookie I really love a lot, or Husbands, which I think is really great, and I think probably is a 5-star movie, but is problematic. Why even some of those movies don't work quite as well is because they don't have that female touch as definitively either. Because even something like Faces has multiple female voices in it, of both her and the other actress that plays John Marley's wife. And that is just...
Lynn Carlin?
Yes. Even that, I said, is a version of that, too. So that says something that Gena Rowlands and other women in Cassavetes movies, but obviously especially her, is what carries these to other levels, I think.
So she was also nominated for Gloria for Best Actress. Which
Interesting.
I wonder if they're just like, hey, we should just throw her a bone on that. Just not because she's not good in that, but it's just like, you'd think there'd be some other ones nominated before that. I know you mentioned it earlier. Also, Opening Night is one that I think she's terrific in. So, and I think we knew it was probably not going to be too long before she passed away because she was so old. But one of our very favorite actors or actresses, period. So, rest in peace to her. Alrighty, now here is the trailer for one of our 2 movies for today, Tampopo.
そっちも映画館なのね。そっちは何食べてる？俺嫌な予感がする。何よ、特製ラーメン。うるさいわね。
で、どうでしょう。私のラーメン。
そうだね。
またいじめられたの？
すいません。私を弟子にしてください。突然この店を本物のラーメン屋にしたくなっちゃったんです。
それじゃあ今日からこの店を町一番のラーメン屋に作り変える大作戦を開始だ。
お願いします。このスープの作り方教えてください。
ダメダメ。
私まだ名前も言ってなかったね。私、タンポポです。
If your Japanese is a little rusty, that's okay. No problem.
Mine is too.
Rusty as in I don't know it. So that's Tampopo. I think that was like a trailer that was released later as a restoration kind of thing. Tampopo literally means
Dandelion
in the English translation. 1985 Japanese comedy film written and directed by Juzo Itami, I believe is how you say that. Juzo. If I didn't pronounce that right, I apologize. Itami. It stars Tsutomu Yamasaki, Nobuko Miyamoto, Koji Yakusho, who's recently, I know, in
Perfect Days, and he was in Cure, and much of that.
And Ken Watanabe, who's the most familiar face in this because he's been in some American stuff, obviously. The publicity for the film calls it the first, quote, ramen western, a play on the term spaghetti western.
Now, as I said last time, that's like the A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, the first Iranian vampire western. It's like, I think it's the last, but...
So this movie's basically about like these 2 like truck driver / drifter types who happen to stop by this younger woman who's wanting to open her own ramen place, and it's honestly...
Well, she already owns it, but it's like, I think her husband owned it, and that she is like trying to make it into something, but then they're like, oh, we can help.
Well, it's like a place that's being hung out by creeps and lowlifes that get eventually kicked out, and this, the main guy, the...
Goro is his name.
Goro, the Yamazaki...
Tsutomu Yamazaki,
actor... is basically, he's like, I'm going to whip you into shape by like taking you around and showing you how ramen, not only how ramen's made, but what ramen means in a kind of a way. The movie's also unexpectedly, like, it's got a plot, but it's also like a series of like kind of comic and sometimes not so comic vignettes.
Yeah.
about food and about like the modern day at that time in the 80s culture of Japan. I'll be honest, going into this, I didn't really know what it was about. I was like, oh, it's like a ramen movie or something. That's kind of what I thought going in. This was something that I really loved a lot, and we had a lot of fun while we were watching this, and it was immediately clear to me that this movie is you know, just to use the cliche of about how sometimes foodies look at food, is that it's not just about the food itself, it's about the culture that originates it, and what that culture means to individuals over the course of it. And so this was like, I know you had mentioned this, and we'll probably talk about it, has some, you know, interesting reminiscent things to it with like Hollywood Shuffle, which was around this same era that this came out. Obviously that was an American movie and this was Japanese. But it is kind of like, you feel like you're going on a field trip through Japan over the course of this. And again, it's not just about the ramen, it's about everything that the culture in Japan inspires into it. So I really love this, and we'll get into talking about some particulars about it. Levi, what did you take away from
I
Tampopo?
thought it was great. I mean, it's a movie I've been wanting to watch for a long time. Because I've always heard it's like really well beloved. And I always just did think the idea of all these truckers that stop, it's like an anti-road movie, literally, in the way that this is, the trip is a road movie that we'll talk about soon. Because I kind of don't think of that as a road movie, but it was, obviously. That this is about, somebody stops in and they're like, we've got to whip this into shape. And it's like it's a remix of the whole, like, the samurai or Western tradition of somebody stops in and, we need help. You know, the Seven Samurai or Magnificent Seven or whatever. And they're like, let's do it. And then they leave, and they're like, we fixed it, and everything's good. But
there's kind of a wistfulness of the leaving, and that the quest is over, now what? Right. Even though it was achieved, you know.
And seeing truckers as modern-day cowboys is interesting, but whatever. And that's an American idea, too. But that's what's great, is that this feels like it's a Japanese movie, you know, or that it feels like it's an American-centric movie in a lot of things that it pulls from, but it also feels very Japanese. And so to kind of talk about that, I mean, in an international cinema standpoint, obviously America, France,
Italy,
you know, were making so many great movies, in Germany, even in its own way, in the 20th century. And ultimately, America and France, I think, won out on that, and maybe Italy. But Japan, I mean, you just think about all the movies that Japan made over the 20th century, different types of movies.
I think the stereotype of them...
Maybe that's too big of a idea to talk about with this, but that's something I was kind of thinking about.
I mean, this seems like a good, interesting reflection and inflection point of what that tradition is, because obviously, I think for most people... if you were to walk up to a person on the street who's probably not even seen many Japanese movies, obviously, but it's like Japanese cinema, what comes to mind? They're going to say Godzilla. They're going to say maybe some action kung fu movies, even though we know kung fu is more from
Battle
Hong
Royale
Kong
or whatever.
Yeah, but the whole Hong Kong Chinese fight movie tradition. But certainly there are martial arts movies made by the Japanese.
And hard-boiled action, those action movies.
Yeah, and then also they would say maybe samurai, which is also akin to that a little bit, but more specifically a historical Japanese phenomenon. And horror,
right?
I think you mentioned also, obviously J-horror is massive.
And then they'd say anime.
Obviously,
literally the biggest.
What's funny is I didn't even think of that, but because maybe it's animation. I was just thinking live action, but absolutely anime. So. I mean, undeniably, Japan has one of the most influential, and then obviously later on Miyazaki, which is anime, but it's like a kind of a more highbrow anime that's more appreciated sometimes by people who wouldn't watch television anime or whatever. It's more popular in the West. So undeniably, like you said, Japan's film culture is rich, vibrant, radiant, and is very much so.
Probably the most so, other than America, I think, in a big way. I mean, because France is, but when you think of French films, you think of a very certain kind of movie. You even feel that way about English cinema, too, or British cinema is very similar.
Well, I think, too, the going stereotype of a French movie would be like a Breathless or another Godard movie, or people would in their head, and maybe this is me to an extent, even though I've seen things from other eras, but like think about like a black and white movie with like people sitting in cafes smoking and drinking and talking about drinking coffee and talking about like what is life and this like existentialist.
My Night at Maud's and
the truth of the matter is the more French movies you watch, the more you're like, well, that is there, but also there are these other things.
Now you have movies like Portrait of a Lady on Fire that are very like, yep, that's a French movie. Like, that special friendship in that movie, you remember?
Yeah.
Anyway.
And then say Italian, I mean, that could go a lot of ways. I think one of the stereotypes of Italian cinema would be like bicycle thieves, like neo-realism post-World War II, about like a city in ruins or a culture in ruins, and yet people are going to try to make a go of it and try to, and again, that is also, it's in of itself a narrow version of Italian cinema. So it goes without saying the stereotypes of all these places are partially true, but ultimately incomplete for each of those different cultures, and Japan's no exception, obviously, because I think this is, obviously, Japan has a very in vogue food culture, and it has for years and years and years. Yes. But this is like taking something that would be almost taken too seriously by maybe even another Japanese director, and like having fun with it, and like,
well, that's what I was going to say too.
Let's like make a heartfelt movie about something that we're not going to take too seriously, but means a great deal to a great many people.
And part of that too, that's what I was going to say, is one of the stereotypes about Japanese culture and Japanese cinema or people and Japanese people is they're all very serious, stoic, and you can either see that from samurai cinema or just post World War II desolation of trying to rebuild the country as a business industrial empire, which it has become.
We've talked about it before between ourselves, and we've seen it obviously. But Hiroshima Mon Amour is one of the most interesting transnational Japanese movies, period, because it's like very much about the ennui and emotional devastation of what it meant to be both French and Japanese at that particular moment in history. So that's an incredibly rich, complicated,
and that also being statement. After the Battle of Dien Bien Phu too, about kicking out the French from Vietnam, and so and so anyway, that's just to say that. But so there's that whole stereotype of stoicism of Japan, but this movie is so funny. I mean, and there are a lot of Japanese comedies, obviously, and like, but once again, that's just to show what a big, diverse, and you use the word vibrant cinema that Japan has. Because I even, and this is just a personal thing, I even in a certain way would probably prefer a lot of South Korean cinema. I think there's a certain sensibility to that I enjoy, but it is very like either violent, number one, or like very about romance, or very serious in its own way, and very like direct in what it's about.
I've seen a few Korean comedies, but that feels like very much more the exception than even Japan would be.
And like I'm saying, I really love South Korean cinema, but as far as what I have seen, I don't feel there's quite as obviously as much diversity of types of movies, and that's also because the country's smaller too.
I always want to shake my head and laugh every time you say anybody, me included, says South Korean cinema. It's like, what about North Korean cinema? It's like, what's on the state TV today?
Yeah.
Like,
you are aware there was that one kaiju movie that they made where they literally kidnapped a filmmaker and made him make or whatever.
That literally sounds like a movie idea.
Right, but no, it actually supposedly happened, but I haven't ever seen it. But that's a whole movie. I know that's the thing, because it was trying to replicate the whole tokugatsu cinema of the 60s and 70s and 80s. But anyway, that's just to say that like. And then even if you look at Hong Kong cinema, while there's so much of that is inherently funny, because I think John Woo's movies are very funny.
Yeah.
But you even look at Wong Kar-wai, and his films are funny, but they're very like soulful and emotional and very kind of serious about what they are.
Those feel more temperamentally Chinese. Just naturally, Chinese is even more even less funnier society than Japan.
Yeah, and I love Edward Yang's movies, but those movies don't really have a sense of humor whatsoever. which is fine because they're two of the best movies I've ever
But
seen.
anyways, like Japan
But yes,
has
so-
much more levity
Right,
in the midst
yes.
of even worse things that have
And
happened.
so that
to them.
is to say that it's
maybe
kinda,
that's the
right.
balm to that.
Yes,
or the,
and maybe that, and all of this is to say that maybe that was what was surprising about this movie to me in its own way, was remembering that was the case. That, oh yeah, okay, this is very light and funny, and even a movie like House, which you've seen, right? Is like a horror movie, and it's very weird and screwed up, but it's like actually more of a comedy almost than it's a horror movie.
It's
feels
definitely
like to
got
me.
a sense of humor to it. Yeah.
But anyway, so that's what I appreciated so much about this was the vignettes and one of my favorite sections of the movie was the stuff in the supermarket of the woman going and biting all and touching all the food, and the manager having to follow her around, and like then she like disappears or something, and it's like.
There's like an inherent tension in a lot of Japanese culture, and there's different versions of it between like what the etiquette is or supposed to be,
right,
versus what the etiquette actually is on a lived-in basis. Because there's the whole scene that I think a lot about from this about it's like this woman teaching other women like how you eat soup, and you're supposed to eat
spaghetti.
Spaghetti.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Spaghetti, and you got to do it in this very precise way, and you can't make a sound, and you can't look vulgar, and you can't look dumb or bad by doing it. You can't draw attention to yourself is basically what it is. And then there's this like foreign guy, American guy who like eats soup, or not soup, I keep saying that, spaghetti, in this very like, loud kind of like slurpy way, and then they all naturally start to replicate that, and even the instructor starts to, and I think that like,
and she's like aggravated at herself doing it. Mm-hmm. It's very specific.
And and again, the movie's filled with a lot of those types of scenes, and then there's a lot of the weird stuff in the hotel rooms, like between the man and the woman, and it's basically these sexual acts that are being committed with food, I feel like that stuff sticks out the most.
Yeah, it's very just
movie.
like, what are we doing here? Like,
and my fiance has spent a few months in Japan years ago, as kind of while she was a student abroad, and she says, and this is, you can just see this from afar anyways in things, but basically has told me that the whole Japanese culture's relation to sexuality is, I'm not going to say weird, but just incredibly different from our own in terms of certain things they're more puritanical about, and then other things they're much more openly out there about, and it's like that's true of any culture.
It's
really.
kind of
it's
an inherent.
Be different,
I guess it's just an inherent contradiction. Is what you're saying?
Yeah,
but it's that Koji Yakusho character is like, and he's like this very like Western figure, or like the Grand Master, kind of like pre-Grand Master, like white suited, like. Even Jean-Pierre Melville kind of like character of like Le Samurai, and like the idea of the whole, he's like this cool cat, and then there's a scene where they literally like kiss back and forth like a egg yellow for like 5 minutes. It feels it ain't really that long, but it's just like, okay, like what are we doing here? But and then his final moment, but then that's also he's a character that calls attention to the fact that it's a movie a lot too, and that whole stuff's very weird, and not even that it's bad, it's just like, okay, what is this exactly?
There was a part of me too, and I know you got written down here on our outline, food and cinema as sensory experiences. I think that character was in some ways drawing even further attention to that relationship between what we're watching on screen and that natural passivity to it that is like only like it kind of demands food be a part of it, as it's something that we are watching, and naturally while we're watching something on a more passive level, we're also like, well, what should I do while I'm doing that? Well, I guess I'll eat, right? And so
you talked about that at the beginning of the movie.
Sequence, because that kind of again breaks the fourth wall a little bit in the beginning, kind of is drawing attention to that relationship between food and cinema, obviously, and also just the movie didn't get too far into this, but like as they're going through all these different versions of ramen, there are these little different cultural differences between how and why people think or eat ramen about it in this way and how they do in this other way. I think a lot of people here in America would watch those scenes and think like, oh, why don't they just have a normal way of doing things? But then if you were normal, when I say normal, I mean like singular way of doing things. But then if you were to ask any average American about how they like their barbecue, then that's a can of worms. Right. That's like, oh, I like it this way. I mean, it's like, that's America's version of this. All these differences between ramen is obviously like every culture has its own versions of it.
Pizza is its own version of that too, which is not even an American thing exactly either, but because barbecue is way more of an American idea than anywhere else.
Yeah.
Although also that was a very Hawaiian thing in its own way about the use of pork. And I mean, and obviously there's use of pork in all cultures, but specifically the way barbecue is made, it's a very American. That's probably our biggest American thing actually that exists is barbecue. Maybe as like a food, because technically the hamburger and the hot dog are, but like I don't know, hamburger literally also is like hamburger.
Yeah, and I was thinking too about traditions of certain sandwiches and a lot of that stuff for like more white culture in America comes from Europe in some roundabout way. Obviously, here in America, we also have the whole like Mexican tradition of Mexican food, Tex-Mex food also. But this is a good little version of other cultures have their own variations and versions of ramen. I really like too that like the kind of the it's interesting. It's like the whole Goro and Tampopo relationship is not exactly either romantic or a father-daughter relationship. It's something that's kind of like in between. Like, how would you categorize that?
I think it's more romantic and it's an unfulfilled romance. But yeah, I did respect the movie that it didn't ever engage in that fully either. I thought so. Yeah,
I agree. And I'm glad it played a little subtler and and then, that whole idea, too, of that this experience and food generally does this, brings people together. That it brings this little ragtag group of people together to see that this one little ramen shop, which is one extra ramen shop going to, like, change the world or anything? Not really. But the idea that, like, the coming and going. And another thing, too, I think, like, if I would have liked to seen anything more about this movie, or not necessarily anything more, but just another version of it, would have been almost a hyperlink movie about the people who come and go between these ramen shops.
Yeah.
Because they're mostly seen or, oriented in the movie purely on the basis of customers and, like, what are their experiences and stories they bring and they go between these places. It's not really explored, which is fine.
Right.
But anyways, I think that would have been, like, a good little addition to, in addition to all these people who are coming together. And then, again, what I like is when, similar to Seven Samurai, where she's going out and getting the team together, like it's a very, diverse little group of people who are coming to do this.
It happens more naturally and organically, though. It's not like they go looking for people. It's kind of like people just kind of hang or become hangers-on of the whole experiment, and are worthwhile in that. But it's not like they're like, oh, we have to find people. It kind of just happens. So yeah,
because Shohei was the chauffeur.
Yeah,
that she gets to work for her. Who was the guy that was the homeless encampment? He was that old master. I can't remember that guy's name.
Yeah,
that he was like, Yoshi Kato, I believe is his name. Says he's credited as noodle making master. I thought he had some other name.
Yeah. Talking about the old guy?
Yeah, it was like the homeless guy, basically, that they got to work for him or whatever. And so I think this is this is probably, honestly, among many great functions of this movie, is to introduce Japanese culture to people who are maybe like, I've not watched a foreign film before or a movie with subtitles. I think, weirdly, this acts as a sort of a possibility of a gateway for such people, or things or ideas. Because, again, I think, like, there's a lot of things that people would immediately jump to, maybe getting more immersed in Japanese cinema, like, obviously, the Godzilla movies, or some of those, like, martial arts movies, or maybe some of the horror, or obviously anime. Samurai, obviously, also. This also acts as, like, at the time, a present, because a lot of those are either historical or fantasy oriented, in some way. This is like obviously at the time a current day story that I think naturally, like any movie you see of a foreign culture outside of your own gives you a great chance to empathize with and have a lot of fun with those types of characters. And see them and their culture in a light that you maybe not normally associate it with, while feeling quintessentially a part of their own culture. Any other thoughts about Tampopo?
No, I think it's really good. Pretty great movie, and I think, like you said, it's a good gateway to a lot of other types of movies, which we'd already been kind of seeing, but what was nice about this was that it was something a little more modern than even those, and was just very, this, like, it felt more random, but also yet more palatable for as a watch, I think. But
so it's coming out in the 80s. We watched the Criterion version of it, which looked very good. The transfer looked good, so that's it for Tampopo. But coming up next, the trailer for 2010's The Trip.
Hey, Rob, Steve.
Oh, hiya. How are you?
Are you free to go away?
Where?
It's a job. It's kind of a tour. Really good restaurants.
Why me?
Misha can't come, and I don't want to go alone. I've asked other people, but they're all too busy. So, do you want to come? Should be 2 rooms under the name Coogan.
We only have 1 double room.
What do you think's going to happen?
You might touch my bottom.
Were you an altar boy?
What do you got? Plenty of heat in my scallops. Heat. Pacino.
I've not heard your Michael Caine, but I assume it would be something along the lines of, my name's Michael Caine.
You were so wrong. Michael Caine used to talk like this.
It's not quite nasal enough the way you're doing it. When it gets loudly, it gets very loud indeed.
Don't do the broken voice, but it gets very emotional.
Cheers.
Taste of a childhood garden.
Was there a lot of alcohol in your garden as a child? I'm sorry, Rob. They always say something like, gentlemen to bed, before we leave at first light. No, they never leave at 9:30. Gentlemen to bed, before we leave at 9:30.
Ish.
Don't you find it exhausting, running around, chasing girls?
I don't chase them. Oh, dear me.
But don't you find it a lot exhausting at your age?
Everything's exhausting past 40.
Oh-ho!
Where have you been? I called you 4 times last night.
I'm with a short Welsh man who does impressions. It's not fun.
Have you been doing drugs?
Sex between 2 people is a wonderful thing. Between 3, it's terrific.
Pithy, vaguely amusing, a cry for help.
If you were to allow your child to have an illness, you could win Oscar Best Actor.
That's disgusting.
What
kind of illness?
I want a room with a view. I want to see a tree.
I'd like a vodka martini, shaken, not stroked.
She was only 16 years old.
I directed the whole movie.
Oh!
How's the trip been?
I can honestly say it's one of the most enjoyable periods of my life.
Just to be clear, this is not the 1960s The Trip.
Yeah, with Peter Fonda.
Because, as we know, Michael Caine used to talk like this in the 1960s, all right? But, and funny enough, I feel like we're going to have even less to say about this movie in its own way than we did about Tampopo, maybe.
Yeah.
But, The Trip is a 2010 British comedy film directed by Michael Winterbottom. It is the first installment of Winterbottom's film adaptations of the TV series The Trip, which is like, so yeah, this is literally like, these movies essentially are feature films edited together out of the TV show.
Yeah.
Which is on those kind of BBC and Sky networks. All those kind of British things. They had made the trip to Spain or trip to Italy, the trip to Spain, and then the trip to Greece after these.
Yeah.
This, of course, is all happening in...
basically like a comedy travel show.
Yes, which is a sitcom, and it's like... Yeah, to just say, the film start, and this kind of describes the whole thing. The film stars Steve Coogan and Ron Brydon as fictional versions of themselves. The first one being obviously an actor, the second one being an impressionist and comedian, an actor in his own way. Steve is asked by The Observer, the Sunday British newspaper, to tour the UK's finest restaurants, and when his girlfriend backs out on joining him, he is forced to go with his best friend Rob. The film is largely
forced
improvised.
to go.
Yes.
With his best friend.
Well, actually, I wouldn't say forced.
Yeah.
I'd say he calls. That's what's kind of funny. It's like, you're the guy who called him, so I don't know why you're so mad about, and he does say, well, other people weren't able to go, so, by the way, but, so yeah, basically the whole idea of this story, the show and the movie and all that, is about these two guys, the two versions of themselves, of Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon being these, like, famous people. Because they're recognized at different points in this. One of them is actually in a dream for Steve Coogan, which is probably one of the funniest things in the movie.
Where the guy at the newspaper?
Ronnie says, "Oh, it says you're a C or whatever."
That's literally what it says. You think it's
on the newspaper. Yeah. Which is funny because then I realized, oh, it is a dream. But at first I was like, wait, is that real? Because I'm like, well, they might literally print that there.
Yeah.
But what's funny is it feels like with Rob's character, it's like way more just, oh, everybody loves him, and Steve Coogan, it's like, what are you doing here? Like,
yeah.
And so we'll talk more about that later, I think, about their relationships to themselves and and their celebrity are very different and very interesting. But in general, I guess a place to start actually is with Michael Winterbottom, who we kind of talked about last week. He's made a lot of different types of movies, but usually all in this kind of docudrama format.
Mm-hmm.
This is a little different because it started as television. But of course he made his first kind of big movie was that Welcome to Sarajevo, which I know was kind of a sort of a big deal for British cinema in the late 90s. And then after that, he's made a bunch of different things, but he made that Killer Inside Me movie. I always forget about that. That kind of doesn't fit into what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
But 24-Hour Party People, a movie called 9 Songs. He made that Tristram Shandy movie, A Cock and Bull Story.
Yeah.
With Steve Coogan was in that. He's made some action movies here and there, but also very specifically, and I talked about this last time, In This World, which I was a big fan of when I saw it in film school, about a Afghan child who's immigrating to England.
Mm-hmm.
And it's shot like it's a documentary, but
Mm-hmm.
Obviously isn't real. And so, yeah, he has this whole sense. And what's interesting about that, a lot of these other things, some of them are these comedies or more light and whimsical versions of, well, whimsy. I don't know about whimsy is a word I'd use. Wildflower whimsy, ? As in the Inherent Vice air freshener reference moment. But obviously with something like Welcome to Sarajevo or In This World are much more serious. And I think that's what works so much about In This World and why it's the best thing I've seen, is that it's just taking it very seriously is what it is. And it's saying this is what it's like to be a refugee.
Mm-hmm.
And and of course that being made also literally during the War on Terror, or right at the beginning of it too, from a British perspective also. And looking at that as in a positive light, rather than a negative light, of saying, oh, look at what these people have to go through to get here, rather than what a lot of Britain and Europe would have been feeling at the time of, oh, we don't want them here kind of attitude is very nice to go and see a movie like that made at that time, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm a big fan of that. And you had seen this one years ago, The Trip, and I've always heard of it as a food movie, in quotes, and the series in general. But yeah, this is a road movie, obviously, about these two guys going and writing about. And it feels like a lot of the times the food is such an afterthought of what's going on.
Oh, yeah. And it seemed like the whole conceit of their travel was more of an excuse to put these two men together than actually telling people about Britain's food culture.
Right.
Yeah, because I feel like Tampopo is genuinely, obviously that's made some years before, but I feel like that movie is genuinely more interested in food culture of Japan than this is about Britain's food culture. This is almost an excuse to put these two men together who've already had some experience in things before together, and really more of a conceit to just see them interact than actually educate anyone either in Britain or abroad on like what this type of restaurant has or that,
Yeah, so
because something like, say, Anthony Bourdain, which obviously comes after this, is a little bit before that too, I think. That's like, obviously, people who like Anthony Bourdain, like, they want to hang around him for a while, but also he's trying to like educate you on these places and let food act as the inciting incident for your own interest in these things, you know.
Yeah.
And now the show might be a little more geared in that pseudo direction, but I wouldn't imagine much more.
Well,
so.
I was looking about that. So actually, that A Cock and Bull Story movie that Winterbottom made had both of them in it.
Mm-hmm.
And is a adaptation of the book Tristram Shandy, which is in itself a metafictional novel of its era. And that version, and this movie is about the Cock and Bull Story movie, is them making a movie within a movie as themselves, trying to adapt that story. Kind of like adaptation, I guess, in its own way. But like about how do we adapt that, and then it's about them adapting it. And them as versions of themselves. As literally Rob Brydon and Steve Coogan. So like ultimately that's kind of how the show was made, was out of that idea. They said, what if we did that, like versions of ourselves that were these like exaggerated truths.
Wouldn't you agree that we both like this movie, The Trip?
Yeah.
And think it's quite funny, I think, just on its surface and on its face. It would probably be even funnier if you knew these people and all the things they did in British TV, especially.
Yes, and so that's something that kind of is lacking for me personally, especially in Rob Brydon's case, because I've seen a lot of, I've seen Steve Coogan in stuff. I mean,
it was right around this time, a little bit before, where Steve Coogan started to be in more American stuff.
In Tropic Thunder.
Yeah, that was the first thing I remember being like, who is this guy?
Yeah,
and
Damien Cockburn.
Ben Stiller cameos in this.
Right. I forgot about that, yeah.
And so, like, it was around this time
Welcome to the movie factory.
where Coogan was being in more American stuff, and there's kind of a subplot in this about, like, what's my next step? Where's my career going? And him getting called by his, like, American agent.
One of the most annoying people ever.
Yeah, offered to, like, be in a British or American TV show. And so it was around this time he was becoming more globally known. I will say Rob Brydon is not a guy that I'm all that familiar with. He's hilarious in this movie, though.
Well, I was looking up some clips of stuff of him, and he's on a lot of British TV. There's like, I found all these clips of like these people that I don't know their names, but I recognize as, oh yeah, that comedian from Britain. I can that are on these big game shows where they all get together. It's like a Whose Line Is It Anyway kind of thing.
Some people from these worlds started to be better known, I feel like, due to the success of the British Office.
Yes.
No, I'm not saying either one of them were on there, and they might have cameoed or something at some point, but I don't know. But like, it was around that era where Ricky Gervais's popularity was starting to get bigger in like the mid to late 2000s, where some of these British TV comedic figures were like starting to be a little bit more well known in the culture as a result of that. I know like the whole like was it Alan Partridge is the big character that Coogan does.
Yes.
It's like a huge thing in Britain, and like that's like, that's a huge thing over there, so like he would be very well known, I think, for that and other things over there. But for here, he's like over here in America, he's like more of this like, the funny British guy that pops up in things here or there.
Right. Like Joker for Leia Du.
Yeah, he's in the trailer for that. And I think that to me the chief source of comedy naturally of this movie is these two people that very clearly know each other very well and deep down actually do like each other, or maybe they don't. Now, I don't think that's really the case. I think that's the case of what this movie's version of these figures are. But and how, like, especially Coogan towards Brydon is, like, deeply annoyed by him. And it's like, well, why did you invite him to come along on this thing in the first place?
It's like a way for, and I think this is what is, and to kind of get into them as themselves and as these characters, kind of part of this I want to talk about, is like, with Coogan, I feel like it's kind of funny, like, this also reminds me a lot of Mason and Dixon, with Coogan being a lot like the Mason and Brydon being more like the Dixon, of somebody who's like more Brydon being like, oh, whatever, don't take everything so seriously, who cares, let's just have a good time and whatever.
And meanwhile, he actually has a family
Yeah,
he's left behind and kind of wants to be back with.
Yeah,
but
because that's the funny thing, and it also the end of this movie reminded me a lot randomly of Local Hero,
another movie made in the British Isles,
right? Where it's like, oh, he goes back home and he's all by himself, and he's like calling people on the phone, like, yeah, I'm not going to do this movie, I'm not going to do that, and then Bryden's just like hanging out with his family, and it's like cutting back and forth, and it's like, I just think it's funny how much this movie and Steve Coogan himself are going out of its way to say, yeah, look at Steve Coogan. He's such a pathetic person. You know, it's like a Charlie Brown figure, literally, where it's like, but like more successful. But I feel like they're the inherent kind of conflict between Coogan and Bryden is Coogan's like, oh, but I want to be like an actual actor, though, not a comedian exactly. And Bryden's like, well, I don't really care. I'll just kind of be a comedian and do what I want to do. And like,
and that, you know, I would say that there's some points where it seems like Coogan's almost embarrassed to be his friend.
Yeah.
But then, like, anytime one of them starts doing impressions, then the other one, and that's a big another obviously highlight of this movie is just seeing them do their impressions and their dueling impressions of people. And like, ultimately, Coogan gives in to doing that, you know, and like, even though he acts like, I think there's some things said that like, oh, I moved beyond that being what I was about, like some stuff where he meets his family.
And they're like, why don't you do that though?
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, like,
and that Bryden is like both the dumber but more content character. I feel like it was obviously what the movie's saying.
Yeah.
And again, I think probably a lot of enjoyment of a lot of people of this movie, especially British, would be about like seeing them portray versions of themselves and their like, you know, personas that they have.
Yeah, and I mean, there's such a big part of it too is all about them just reciting things to each other and singing songs, and that's one thing. And we can talk about how this works as a TV experience and a movie experience, because we don't know that because we haven't seen the TV show. But I feel like I'm still watching a version of that with this. But that there's just so much about randomly like British culture and Northern British culture. There's the whole Samuel Taylor Coleridge section of the movie where they're talking about him and those like lake poets, they called it, of like, you know, William Wordsworth and Charles Lamb, Robert Southey, Charles Lloyd. I'm reading these. I'm not just getting these from memory because I have no idea about any of this stuff. But, you know, they like literally are talking about Kubla Khan at one point, and they go to like Coleridge's where he lived at one point.
Yeah.
And talk about he was like addicted to laudanum and all this stuff, and like they're talking about that, and there's like all this random stuff that feels very TV-ish. Like, oh yeah, that seems like that'd be an episode of a TV show where they go to Samuel Coleridge's house and talk about what do we think about him?
Yeah, that would be like a whole episode.
And it's like, but it's in a movie, and so it's kind of weird. But yeah, and then I mean, one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is where they're just driving and they're doing the whole like, we leave at dawn or whatever.
Yeah, they keep saying like, oh, what if it was like this chivalry of the past, but done with this precise timing.
Yeah, and it's like we leave at 9:30, and like, because they're like, because it'll take 2 hours to get to this place, and blah blah blah. We'll be there at noon, and like 9:30 ish, as it said, you know, and yeah, it's interesting. You can see that they're obviously, and I feel like this is the case with American comedians and theater types also, but I feel like it's especially the case with England, is that they are so well bred on all this, and I say well bred both genuinely and maybe in quotes, of this like poetic or theater background of like, oh, all this singing and reciting and all this, because then they like have this whole kind of the last thing in the whole movie is them driving back. The climactic scene in its own way is them like who can go through all the do re mi fa sol la ti do like at the best way, and it feels like Bryden wins that, and he's like and
he has really that one of my favorite recurring jokes is him doing the character that's like real small voice,
the small voice man in a box, which seems impossible.
Yeah,
I don't even know how he even
like
does
Coogan's
that.
In private trying to do it,
right?
He's
like, what's my man in a box? He's like. But yeah, because I've like then went and looked that up on YouTube, and there's other versions of him doing that, and it's like this is literally like magic or something. I don't
you
even
feel
know how
like
you do
the
that.
volume literally got turned down, but then it's very precise.
Yeah,
one of my favorite scenes also is where they're like at a cemetery, and that would be a whole episode is just like going to a cemetery and talking about this and that, and it's like, oh, like what would I say is your eulogy or whatever, and like and basically like talking about, well, it was whatever, and just like kind of crapping on him, but eulogizing him. And that,
I'm always the guy that gets crapped on, but
but that to me seems like the movie in a nutshell. Other than the
I'm in a nutshell. That should be its own.
Other than the Michael Caine scene, which is probably the most famous thing has to be the most famous thing out of this movie, is their dueling Michael Caine impressions. And so I'm very interested to see the other movie versions of this. I don't know if I would watch the full TV version. Maybe I would, just to see what it was. But this felt like, I think an interesting little we can take this content that was on TV and kind of edit it down into a single film version that's going to be more accessible to people. Like, would you have a interest in watching a full season version of this?
Yeah. I mean, I'd kind of like to watch the movies themselves first as like versions of that.
Yeah.
This sounds random. I feel randomly about these kind of like I do about Star Trek, where I'm like, just kind of watch the movies and see what those are about, and then I can go back and watch the shows later, because there's so much of it. Now, of course, in this case, there's not as much.
Yeah, Star Trek literally has, I don't even know how many seasons of television content, but it's a massive number, right? So, I would like to see the other future versions of this. And I think for me, one of the, things that makes this would make this more rewatchable is just like really knowing more about them and then going back to watch these, because I think that would obviously add.
I am saying I would like to, but I'm just saying I think I'd like to watch the shows first.
Right. Well, not even the shows, but literally shows they've been in or things they've done that are like, this is clearly like an echo of their public personas.
Yeah, and that's what I thought was. I'm always impressed when somebody's like, I'm going to debase myself and look a fool like Coogan does in this. Because I think Bryden's great in this, but you get the sense that they're like, yeah, you're the cool guy, and we're not going to make you look bad. And it's kind of
almost like too. I feel like making the critique that maybe, in Coogan saying this himself, he's more of the sellout type to go out and be and do these other things outside of their own little worlds,
and that like he's like, oh, I can actually do it better, but Bryden's always funnier, and he can't always do it better either. But like, no, and that's the thing about this too, is like, there's a lot of scenes that are just fun. There is a lot of stuff that's funny, definitively, but there's long sections where it's just people talking sometimes, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah,
it's like it's like more. Not laugh out loud funny, and then like literally, there's some stuff I literally was like, oh my god, that's the funniest thing I've ever heard. Like about the going to because he's like from Manchester originally, Coogan is, and he said something about because he was talking about he wanted to take his girlfriend up there. She had never been there or something, and he said, we're gonna take her to all the gun violence sites or whatever. I was like, oh my god, like random stuff like that.
And I think the possibilities of a project like this are that you feel like the third member of this group, where you're like the camera and you're just like following these guys around and seeing them get into these very small, pretty much meaningless misadventures just for the sake of, I'm like covering all these places, but it's like,
but are you really?
Are you really? Like, I mean,
because like that's such a big part of this is like how often they go and like, yeah, cool, Bryden eats scallops again. Yeah. It's like, okay, like, and they kind of talk about it, but you almost feel like it's like, yeah, but they're never really getting anything done. Like, yeah.
So, the trip from 2010. I feel like this is one of our shorter episodes. We didn't talk a whole lot about either one, but I feel like.
Yeah,
they're both kind of hard movies to talk about at length, because they're both very self-evidently about their world and their characters, and like, food as this experiential thing. I think Tampopo even more so, because as we said, I don't think the trip's fundamentally interested in food in the same way that Tampopo is, but both very solid movies. I think both good in their own right, and certainly good as double features. So that about do it for our episode of Overlapping Dialogue today. But don't run.
In fact, this is what it's all about right here.
Episode 99 coming up.
Like, just like the football game that happened today, and I said football, but I actually meant soccer. Because that's what it is.
Football.
Association football. That game is really what it's all about. This is what it is. In the words of Menace to Society tagline, this is it. This is what's real. So,
Jeff Probst, what have we got next time?
Stay tuned for scenes from our next episode.
Well, there's no number for Frank in any of Earl's stuff, and he's pretty out of it. I mean, like I said, he's dying of cancer. So.
What kind of cancer?
Well, it's brain and lung.
My mother had breast cancer.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is she all right? Is she?
Oh, she's fine now.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, it was scary though.
Oh, it's a hell of a disease.
Oh, it sure is.
Yeah.
So, wait, I'm sorry, so why call me?
I know this sounds silly, and I know that I might sound ridiculous, like this is the scene of the movie where the guy's trying to get a hold of the long-lost son, but this is that scene. This is that scene, and I think they have those scenes in movies because they're true, because they really happen, and you gotta believe me, this is really happening. I mean, I can give you my number, and you can go check with whoever you gotta check with and call me back, but do not leave me hanging on this, all right, please. Please. See, this is the scene of the movie where you helped me out.
That clip, of course, you heard was from Magnolia from 1999.
Episode 99. We didn't plan that.
We literally didn't plan that. I'm just now thinking, well, it seems so obvious
But
now.
I am what I am.
We were originally going to put in the Julianne Moore screaming at the pharmacy scene.
Yeah.
Which we'll talk about as we're going to be doing a commentary on this movie next time.
Yes.
Because you didn't hear another clip, so it was just purely for Magnolia. So we're going to be doing a commentary for that. But, for whatever reason, I was thinking, because we're going to have a big conversation about why we think this movie is a work of genius. Obviously, it doesn't work for everybody. I feel like a moment in a scene like that of Philip Seymour Hoffman on the phone, talking the way he is, about the cliches of the moment, the cliches of the scene.
Yeah.
And like him and the character saying that this is just so spectacular, it could almost only happen in a movie, right? Whether or not that moment...
I know, it's like I'm crazy, right?
Whether that moment works for you or not is in some ways a barometer of what you're going to think about the rest of the movie.
And also the it's not going to stop scene of them singing. It's like if you're not in for that.
Yeah,
then you're,
the Wise Up singing scene.
Oh, that's the name of it. I was trying to think of the song.
It's not going to stop until you wise up.
Right,
the song. But
right.
Whether you're willing to go there as a viewer, I think is a big test of whether or not this movie works for you. Of course, it's Paul Thomas Anderson's third feature film. We're, of course, huge fans of Paul Thomas Anderson on this podcast.
I'm starting to think I'm not a fan. No, just kidding. That's a total lie.
It's literally your favorite director.
It's a total fabrication. Yeah.
He would probably be my 2 or 3.
And I was going to say, because I'm go back and forth now about this for a long time has been my favorite of his movies, meaning it's in my top 10 favorite movies. But I rewatched There Will Be Blood here a while back, and I probably shouldn't admit this, but I showed it to my middle schoolers.
Levi doing hero's work and showing.
But I did. Well, that movie actually isn't really that bad.
No,
at all.
I mean more in the quality of the movie.
Oh yeah, right. But technically, but really, it's fine. It's like a PG-13. It's not that big of a deal. I did cut around some stuff in quotes. I actually didn't, but let's just say that we.
Let's just say he did.
But anyway, so I showed that movie 3 times to each class. One to each class, and they were actually pretty into it. By the way, I should say.
Yeah.
And I did this because I had a little bit of extra time on my hands at one point, and I was like, you know what? I was showing them clips of it. Because I showed them the milkshake scene, and I was like, they thought that was so funny.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, okay, we got to watch this whole thing. But,
no,
because then they're like, I want to see that scene, and then that's it. I don't care. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, you're gonna have to sit through the whole movie. Then.
Yeah.
But anyway, I watched that movie, 3 times in a row over a couple days. And I was just really thinking about it a lot. And so I started to think, is that maybe my favorite? Because I've that movie lived in my headspace for like a week. And And that's a movie I'd seen so many times from a relatively younger age, even younger than they were, when I first saw it. And that's why I am the man I am today.
We even joked about doing like a emergency There Will Be Blood podcast, and let's just say that might very well happen in the future.
Right,
We're not
but
taking it off
my
the
point
table.
of saying all that is I thought that movie had kind of crystallized itself in my brain for a long time.
Yeah.
And I was kind of like, okay, yeah, whatever, like, fine, it's all right, like, or not, I don't mean it's all right. I mean, it was a great movie, but I kind of forgotten what was so great about it. You know what I mean? Like, it was like, yeah, it's great. Okay, yeah, sure. And then to rewatch that movie that many times and really actually have to think about what the movie is saying inherently. Because I did actually turn it into like a themes and ideas about like, what is this movie actually saying? And what do y'all think it's saying? And, what... And, of course, they just sat there while I explained it to them, basically, rather than they incorporated any ideas. So that did make me think, oh, maybe this is my favorite one. But...
Let me just say The Master is my all-time favorite movie, period, so that's, of course, my favorite PTA movie.
But this movie, though, why it is ultimately still, in a way, my favorite movie, I think, is as great as There Will Be Blood is. It's kind of, it's walled off emotionally. Is a movie. It's about a character who is emotionally walled off from the world, and at times engaging with that fact very definitively, I think, because that whole movie is ultimately about somebody who slowly cannot trust anyone. His own son is not actually his son, his brother is not really his brother, and he doesn't have anyone in the world.
And pretty much all the PTA movies before and since are about characters who are like emotionally messy, chaotic characters, and that's kind of a version of him doing a movie about a guy who is not and is working to make sure that emotional stuff does not get into his life, and the one time he does let emotions in, he's very much disappointed and wrecked by that, and so he's like, I will never allow that to happen again. That's kind of the point of that.
Yeah. And so anyway, what's so great about Magnolia and why I love it so much is because it's that in its own way, about these, how terrible my life is, but like all these different people. Mm-hmm. And it's from a more working class perspective. Yeah. And then a very I'll say high level. It is, and this guy is privileged and rich, but like the highest level it really gets is like, other than I guess the Alan Partridge character, not Alan Partridge. Was that his name actually? Wait a second. Whoa. Isn't his name literally Alan or something Partridge? What's his name?
Earl Partridge.
Okay, it was close though. I was like, wait a second, Alan Partridge? Is that literally?
By the way, Michael Murphy is Alan Kligman Esquire. Let me get you a car,
Linda. That's the funny thing. I know we're just going to be quoting the movie while we're watching it. But other than the Earl Partridge character, the biggest, he's a celebrity, is a kid's game show host. Which is, incredibly sad in its own... But it really is a movie
which is way before Me Too. As far as, that, all that stuff that goes on with that character.
Right. But I don't know what I've done. And obviously the movie's all about coincidence and about these characters and fate and these people being together. But ultimately it's just about all these different types of people all living the worst day of their life in various ways.
Simultaneously.
Yeah, and and you can think about certain characters, it's like what goes up and down. Sometimes with John C. Reilly and Earl's daughter, or not Earl's daughter, what's her name in the movie? I'm sorry. April Grace, and is that it? No.
Melinda. No, not Melinda Dillon.
What is her name? I think it is April Grace is the actor's name. But anyway, the woman that John C. Reilly's in love with is Philip Baker Hall's daughter.
Yeah.
They're kind of maybe having the best day of their life.
April Grace is Guinevere.
They're kind of having the best day of their life.
Yeah.
But also are deeply disturbed and or lonely people.
Yeah.
Whereas everybody else, it's this is ground zero right here. This is where it all ends, basically.
Well, there's also too characters that are either doubles for each other or like future versions or past versions of like, because you think of Quiz Kid Donnie Smith and him like kind of looking at the boy who is the new like big quiz champion.
And I'll know his name when I see it here. It's funny because I've seen this a bunch. I can't remember any of these names. What is his name? There's literally a character named Thurston Howell, and that Henry Gibson is literally because he's never actually named. I guess they just called him that. Okay, so literally, we actually just paused it. We had to literally go look and type in because it's not on the Wikipedia
Well, that
page.
happens sometimes with child actors. Who
Yeah,
don't
but like
end up
he's like
being,
in the movie.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, he's one of the main characters.
right?
In the movie.
But anyway, yeah, that character,
Jeremy Blackman
yes,
is the actor,
and he's really good. It kind of reminds me of Haley Joel Osment.
There's a
of that.
TMZ article called Stanley Magnolia. Member him,
yeah.
in 2020.
But anyway, yeah, like I don't know why that was so hard to find, but yeah, like he's like the version of the Quiz Kid Donnie Smith who's actually realizing these things at the same time as he is, but as a child almost.
And then you have these powerful men of the 20th century, both either directly dying of cancer or will die soon.
Yeah.
Then you have like the cancellation, the seeming cancellation of one of their sons for a lie that he told about his background.
Yeah.
And
it's funny that's why he gets
and,
canceled,
and it's like,
not
when you
because
think
of
about like
anything else he does.
The scope of everything else going on, there's also like a killer on the loose in this movie that the movie kind of
is he called
up,
Worm?
It gives up caring about. I think there was more shot for that.
Guns disappear.
Yeah, but
things fall from the sky. Like
the emotional, like fulcrum of the movie to me rests on that relationship between
John C. Reilly and April
John
Grace.
C. Reilly and April Grace, and I mean the movie literally ends on that note, but also like. They just feel like they're in a wholly other movie, and that could be said of a lot of other stories in this. This is a movie when I first saw it, I loved it from the first time I saw it because the very first PTA movie I saw was There Will Be Blood. That was we talked about in the past. That was my first Netflix movie I ever got, and loved it. I think I saw Boogie Nights soon after that, and I liked that movie fine enough, but I've never totally loved it. Then I saw Magnolia, and I really loved it. I remember from the very beginning, it's got that Ricky Jay voiceover, and it's like talking about these coincidences and stuff. I remember like really being like, "What is this?"
Yeah.
Like, this
I remember
like
that
it's totally.
You showed me that before I ever saw the whole movie, and I was probably about 10 years old, maybe a little older than that. It might have been a little further on that, but I was like about middle school age.
Yeah.
And I first saw that, and I was like. Even at that moment, was very like, what is this? I've never seen anything like this. Is the opening of the movie, and then you said, and I remember you told me, and that has nothing to do with the rest of the movie, and I was like, well, then what's the movie about?
Yeah.
And then it's about everything, you know. Yeah, I mean that's.
I mean, and I think there's a lot of ways you could categorize this movie. To me, ultimately, the way, like, if I had to pitch somebody on what is this movie, it's a Robert Altman movie made for the MTV generation. It's like. It's got all those Altman things that we love, and obviously Altman was like one of his premier favorite filmmakers and like a huge influence. I mean, he got a lot of Altman comparisons.
Right.
With Boogie Nights.
Not that Altman wasn't a great stylist, but it's a lot more stylish than his movies are, though, as far as like being very like and cacophonous and
that, and also like literally like the Amy Mann music is like this movie wouldn't exist if not designed around that music in a clear way. And to the point where it feels like a music video where you're jumping between these different stories that on the surface don't look like
and they kind of filmed more stuff for music videos that she made based on the movie that wasn't even in the movie. So,
we talked about it way back when we were talking about the movies of 1999, and it's come up here and there even since. There's a lot of really great high quality stuff that. Obviously is there. I think we would agree this is still one of the very best, if not the best, out of that year. In large part because I think it, for us too, if you think about the arc of the PTA careerness of it all, it definitely confirmed him as not only one of the big directors of the decade in terms of this new talent, but kind of, and we like Tarantino a lot, and like say Alexander Payne and like Wes Anderson and some of the other directors that were coming around about this time. But it shows that stylistically his bravura, I think, has greater heights than any of those directors, and also that like he is, and this is true, kind of a lot of them to different degrees. A lot of their movies have a lot of those directors though have a sort of an ironic distance between the material and the way it's being directed. This is a movie that is like, and I mean this is a compliment, like a slobbering, emotional 17-year-old's like, this is the most real thing that's ever been made,
right.
And like, and he even said during the press of this movie when it was coming out, so for better or worse, this will be the best movie I ever make. And not only even a few years went by, and he was like, I think I was in a raw place when I said that. And then he made
Dirty Blood, which is the best movie he's ever made. But
and I think he's even kind of laughed at that. And there's also a great documentary made about this movie called That Moment that's on the Blu-ray.
I might try to watch that before we do
Have you seen that before?
I've seen big parts of it. I don't think I've ever seen the whole thing. But I've like seen a lot of it.
And he does not always come off looking great during that, but I'm glad it was made because it really shows him at this moment in time and like what he's bringing to the table as a filmmaker.
He was young and he had made Boogie Nights, which was such a big success. And we've voiced our complaints of that movie in the past. And how I think it's a really well made movie that is like morally bankrupt in a lot of ways that I feel this is not.
Mm-hmm.
He was in a very dark place with his father's death.
Right when Boogie Nights was coming out,
right?
His dad was in the middle of
and that
dying.
I feel like in its own way that was a strange maturation for him that resulted itself in a movie that still felt like something made by a very young man.
Mm-hmm.
That the best scene of the whole movie, though, I think, and we'll talk about it. It's probably going to be the point where we're just going to sit here and just listen to it rather than say anything. Is Jason Robards' big monologue about regretting what he did to the woman he was in love with, and that she died, and it was Tom Cruise's mother in the story, and that is in its own way him reckoning with his father's death, in a very direct, serious way. That's not all the other stylistic, hoopla of the movie, which is all great, but I just feel like it's a movie that has a lot to say. And what is so great about it is I feel like it is relatively easy to understand what it's about.
Yeah.
Which is about this kind of like, I guess, the end of the 20th century. Because it kind of is a Y2K movie in its own way of like being about everybody running around like crazy.
And it literally has like a semi-apocalyptic scenario. And I think that's another thing too. The fallen frogs, that was another bridge that not everybody was willing to cross for the movie, And something that was too unbelievable or whatever.
Which actually that has happened, but whatever. Outside of the Bible, that stuff does happen sometimes. But, I think rain in general in L.A. is kind of unrealistic. So why are frogs that much different? But yeah, the movie ultimately is about all this like wild end of the century, end of the millennium ideas, while also saying, hey, but wait, why don't you just, and it sounds corny to say this, literally reach out and touch the people that are right there.
Yeah.
And as like youthful as the movie is, that's actually a really complex and mature idea to make of I'm going to make this big movie after I've made Boogie Nights, which is not this like big end of, a big like narrative about the porn industry or like is a period piece, or it's like, no, it's very much something else that he's never done anything like that again, because most of his movies, every movie since then except for Punch Drunk Love has been a period piece and is about something else.
And like usually focused on one character or like
a couple characters.
A couple.
Not like a big ensemble like he did with Boogie Nights and this.
Yeah. I feel like his most ensemble-y movie since then has probably been Licorice Pizza.
Yeah.
And even that's like not exactly the same thing. But anyways, this has been one of those movies that ever
Breaking
since
Case of Emergency
podcast has been around that we've of course talked about when we're going to do Magnolia, because it's obviously I saw that movie earlier this year. And I'm
trying to remember the last time I watched. It's been a little while, couple years, but
So,
I've seen it a bunch, but this is one of those movies like we have our own language of the way that we talk to each other, and this movie randomly populates a great amount of that. Yeah. Mostly in a comedic bent.
And I think, I mean, I think most people would acknowledge PTA is one of our great directors now.
Yeah.
This was a movie that was kind of divisive when it come out, and some people have come around more on it. Other people have been like, no, I'm still not about this.
Yeah.
It was one of those movies for us day one that we were always like, yeah, this is...
no, it's a very profound movie that I think it can also easily get lumped in with, like, that 1999 or, like, literally turn of the century, like, Sid Field rewriting sections of screenplay talking about this is the way you make a movie kind of movie, like American Beauty was a big one of those. This was one of those. About the idea of, it's so slick and it's so... But it actually is that great. Like, like the opener of the movie can feel very... whatever his name was in American Beauty, and I'm already dead. Like, it can feel very, so cool, whatever. But actually is great.
Yeah.
And what's weird is that movies don't feel like they get made like that anymore. Even a movie like American Beauty, which I don't think is good at all, I have a respect for, wow, you're really going out on a limb trying to do something, And there are movies that do that, but not in like a popular sense. Which, I mean, it's debatable to call Magnolia a popular movie. I mean, it made money, but it wasn't like a big success. Even like Boogie Nights was.
Right.
So, But anyway, I mean, it's one of the best movies in 1999. That, I think, and Eyes Wide Shut are like right there at the top. And then
Two
the
Tom
Matrix,
Cruise movies.
Like right all right
and the
there
Matrix
together.
Also,
AI. Well, no, sorry. What? AI was in 2001, not 99. I don't know why I was thinking that. There was another movie, though, I was trying to think of, 99. Well, Election's up there. But anyway, this is...
Being John Malkovich is up there.
That was one. I feel so dumb I said AI out loud. That's just embarrassing, but we're not cutting it out. Because like Magnolia, I feel like I'm like the
it's not going to stop till you wise up.
Yeah, and in Magnolia, where literally, like, I think that's one of my other favorite scenes in that movie is when William H. Macy, who might pound for pound maybe be my favorite character in the movie. I don't know. That's a big question that maybe we'll come to the answer to at the end of watching it.
We're going to talk about it next week, but like the moment of when John C. Reilly's watching like the Today Show and eating cereal or whatever and genuinely laughing is such a moment.
Yeah, it's like
that tells you a lot about who he is.
But with the scene where William H. Macy like freaks out and flips out and he's drunk and he admits that he's in love with Brad the bartender in quotes.
And going out of his way to get braces just to
that's
have attention paid to him.
Deeply sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like that scene when I'm like, hey, I said AI was a 1999 movie. Like, oh my god, I'm having a crisis. Like, but anyway, so yeah, looking forward to that. That's it. And then the episode after that, it's gonna be get ready for the big surprise, as Arnold Schwarzenegger once said.
This is Kyle.
This is Levi.
Take care. God bless.
Thank you very much. So nice. Goodbye.